Hey everybody, this is Amy. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We're going to wait for kind of some more people to trickle in, and then we will get going. Okay, so the title of this workshop today is Bringing Presence to the Online Classroom. Now, normally I title this Bringing Positive Presence to the Online Classroom, and I don't know why I didn't title it that way this time, because the reality is when you're in the online classroom, your presence could be either positive, negative, or neutral. And I think like when you think about your everyday life, there are times that you walk into a room and someone's presence is just very negative. You feel it the moment you walk in. And sometimes you walk in and just feel that positivity. And so when we talk about bringing presence, we're obviously very much talking about making sure we're bringing those positive aspects into the online classroom. So one of my favorite quotes about education is that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. And I have always found this to be true, that whether it's the relationship with the instructor or the facilitator or the relationship with the content, if you don't feel connected to one or both of those, you are not going to have significant learning take place. And I think that for many of us, if we think of ourselves in terms of students, either we're in school now achieving, a higher degree, or we think about it in terms of professional development, sometimes we attend a PD session and we feel super jazzed. We're really connected with that person. They make the content interesting for us. And it makes us feel engaged and involved and invested, and we learn more then. And there are other times where the content is dry and it's boring and the person is just sort of spitting it out for the sake of spitting it out, and you don't feel that connection. And you feel like, I just need to get this done. Like, just give me the test, let me pass it, and let me go. And our students feel the same way. And so we have to think about what is the presence we bring and how do we form that relationship so the learning can occur. And I just really loved this picture of wheat. It sort of reminded me of being in Montana. So throw that out there. So prior to COVID, obviously the COVID bullet here was never on the slide. But when we think about why students are taking online courses, and when I say student, I mean learner in general. So we're talking K-12, higher ed, professional development, continuing ed, whatever the case is. So why do learners take an online course? So with COVID, no one really had a choice. They had to take an online course, which is quite possibly the worst atmosphere you could have for evaluating your presence, as well as how engaged they are and what the quality of online education is. So when we look at this in context, we want to be evaluating things in the context of pre-COVID and starting this fall. When you emergency throw everyone into an online course, it's not a true distance or online education. It's really just, you're just trying to damage control every day. So typically, learners take an online course for convenience, necessity, perhaps it's a schedule issue, they have life circumstances, the program offerings are that it's only online. I teach an information literacy course online. It's only taught online. That's a struggle for some of my students who don't like to be in an online course. So they're there because that's the program offering. I myself am an online student. I don't think I could go into a face-to-face classroom because between my work schedule and my life schedule, that's not a possibility for me. So being able to log on to my classes at 10 o'clock at night, I'm a little bit of a night owl and work until midnight. That's the only way I could continue my education at this point. K-12 is a bit of a different atmosphere and circumstance here. So K-12, students may be online because that's a parental choice. It might be an alternative school option, perhaps for a student who is ill, suspended, or otherwise unable to attend school, or it may be a choice option. And there are, when I talk about parental choice, there are several totally online K-12 schools. I can think of one private one, which is the K-12 Online Academy, which was formerly called the K-12 International School. And then Blue Sky Online, I think it's Blue Sky Online, out of Minnesota. Ben may be in here, and he works there. And that is I believe, a public K-12 charter school that's completely online. So different motivations there. When we think about all of the reasons people might be in an online class, we have to really evaluate the perceptions about online learning. So I think that often the perception is there will be less interaction. The teacher's not really going to talk to me. They're not going to know who I am, and I'm not going to have to put as much in, right? Like either from the facilitator point of view or from the student point of view, I'm just going to open that class and let it go. And I think that it tends to be a perception that happens. Some people perceive online courses as easier. They feel like there's less work, there's less grading, things like that. And the other common perception is that it will take less time to either teach an online course or enroll in an online course. And I think that people who have taught online courses may find that it actually does not take less time. In most cases, it can take more time if you're doing it well. Any comments, questions, or things anybody wants to add just at this point so far?
Hi, I'm Diane Marsh, but I have to agree with you that it does take more time.
Oh, you're muted, Diane. Hang on.
Sorry, my name
okay.
is Diane Marsh. I also teach at Montana Digital Academy as well as face-to-face. And if you're doing it, like you said, if you're doing it right, it takes so much time. When we went into COVID, I was working like 12-hour days just to make sure I was staying in touch with all of my students and keeping them engaged and talking to them and connecting with parents. So that parent element is a whole nother level on online that you don't have with
and having had my kids sort of do some quasi online learning for the last part of the school year, definitely. I tried not to be that parent checking in, and because we work in this industry, kind of have a better handle on things. But there were so many parents who just, they don't know how to, it's very difficult. So I imagine that the amount of time put in just conversing with parents has got to at least triple the amount of time. And you've got lots of support in the chat here with people saying like, I second that, it's taken triple the time, worked more teaching online than in the physical classroom. Jess, I also got my master's through WGU and agree that I would recommend that route for adult ed, online ed, if you need to do that. But yeah, and I think that it's sometimes when we look in terms of how our schedules are, in the work environment, we are often not given the amount of time we need to properly form the relationships we need to in teaching in the online environment. There's an idea that, hey, you taught 3 hours of lecture, now your 3 credit hour course is going online, it's still 3 hours. And that's just not the case at all. So when we talk about teacher perceptions about online classes, for a lot of teachers, it's brand new territory. And the reason that this particular workshop came about was that when I was in graduate school, I was working, assisting a team of instructional designers, and I would often have to meet with the faculty to talk about accessibility in their classes. And the theme that kept coming around was that, yeah, I said I'd give online teaching a try, or I was told I had to, but they just handed me this course shell, and I haven't had any training. I don't know what to do or where to begin. It's all brand new territory. Sometimes the technology is the hurdle. It can be very difficult for people to figure out how to use the technology to create the type of environment online that they're used to being in face-to-face. I think some of the other perceptions are whether or not online education is functional. And I think you're going to hear more about that and people questioning whether or not online education is comparable, because people are looking at the immediate time right now, which is, well, look how bad it was after COVID, but that's not online education. And we all know that. And again, back to that technology piece, many people feel that mastering technology is going to be a huge undertaking for them. And so I think if you're in a faculty support area, the best thing you can do is make sure that you have lots of small video snippets that are screencasts that can help break down this barrier. Someone can put them in a book in Moodle. They can go in and they can say, I just want to know, how do I set up an assignment? They click it and it's a screencast walking you through just assignment. Very short, less than 5 minutes. It really helps your faculty to learn things in an environment where they don't have to be in front of everyone and show that they didn't know something, where they can come to you if they do have a question, but it's very easy for them to navigate. They can watch it 20 times and no one's going to say anything. But if you ask that same question 20 times in a faculty meeting, you can bet everybody notices that. So You know, some of the other teacher perceptions are that less engagement, and I think we get some of this talking about this in the chat, that it can be difficult to conceptualize how engagement is going to carry across this border, right? It was face-to-face. I have your facial cues, I have your body language, I have the intonation in your voice, I have all of these things to cue me into whether or not you're engaged. How do I get that in the online classroom? And what if my students don't want to engage? What if my teachers don't know how to engage? And maybe it will be easier to just teach. So these are kind of the points that I think come from the teacher or the facilitator perspective. I'm actually just going to read one of the comments, and it says that they say we have digital natives in our classroom, and I'd say this is so far from the truth. They do know how to use social media, but they don't know how to use other technology. It's a very common misconception that because you are your students and your learners and your courses maybe from the digital age, that they'll know how to use a learning management system or Office or Google suite of things, because we think, well, they can figure out Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. Why can't they figure this out? And that's because there's two totally different things. You're talking about something very templated that says type here, hit post, versus go here, click here, use this, come back, do this, and then submit, right? So totally different. And so we do have to keep that in mind. So what is engagement? So engagement is actually a term that's used to describe the degree to which your students display attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion. So those are the things that are often shown when we know a student is learning. And that's what you see in that classroom, right? The person who raises their hand, who's excited every day when they come in, they're optimistic about coming in, and they're curious. They ask you questions. And it's often said that students will achieve more and perform at a higher level when they demonstrate behaviors of engagement. And I don't think that's probably news to anyone in this class, in this workshop. I think we all know that, you know, when you're engaged in something, you're probably going to do better in it. But what is presence, and how is that different from engagement? So hopefully you can all see this. I feel like the slide's a little small. So there's different things that make up presence. You have telepresence, which is the sense of being there, which is kind of what we're trying to recreate here, right? Telepresence. We're trying to make it seem like we feel like we're there at Carroll College together. But social presence is the sense of being together. So if we look at this conference, this is telepresence. We're trying to feel like we're together in one of the rooms at Carroll College, and we're doing our workshop like we typically would. Social presence, that sense of being together, comes with that platform Remo that we're using. We go in, we kind of circulate around the cafeteria, we find a table with people, it's small, it's intimate, we're talking, and that's trying to recreate the social presence where the socialization occurs. So telepresence in a virtual classroom, this is where the instructor and the students feel as though they're in the learning environment together. And social presence, the student and teacher feel as though they're together socially. So not only do I feel like I'm in a classroom, I also feel connected to the other learners and to the instructor in my classroom. Anyone have any questions they want to ask or comments they want to make about the concept of presence? No? All right. So when we add telepresence and social presence together, students and teachers feel like they're together in a classroom, regardless of geography or synchronicity, and they feel like they're truly connecting with those around them, and they feel almost as if they've been transported to an equitable physical space. So things seem very intimate. They feel like they're right there in that classroom, even though they could be at home. That can be difficult to achieve because you can't control the environment at home, and you can control the environment to some extent in your face-to-face setting. All right. So one of the things that you absolutely have to consider when you're trying to build presence is learner needs. So learner needs is basically, you know, what difference exists for students in how they learn or expected to learn in an online classroom versus a face-to-face classroom. So I want you guys to kind of think about that for a second. And then if anybody has answers to that, I'd love to hear it. So really, what differences exist in our expectations for the online learner versus the face-to-face learner? I actually just read a comment in here that said that you can have like students who don't make it to class, like that 8 a.m. class, because they're not good at getting up in the morning. But online class is more flexible So is the expectation different? You know, if you only do if you come late to online class, do I feel and think the same as I do when you walk into my face-to-face classroom late? Can you think of other times? Are there other ways that anybody here kind of thinks that there might be some different expectations between face-to-face and online? You can feel free to unmute yourself and speak if you'd like.
I know that we've said that, can you hear me? Am I?
Yes. Yep. Hi,
Okay.
Sarah.
I know that with COVID, it was completely different. And I've taught some online classrooms prior to COVID. But COVID was definitely a whole new ballgame. But I ran into the fact that my students didn't have a good study space. And they didn't have, like, you know, if they were at home on their beds instead of in their dorm rooms or having
Right.
access to the library. So their studying behaviors really struggled coming into that online presence. So,
Yeah.
and those are my kids screaming in the background, so I am going to pause.
That's usually mine too. Yeah. And I would agree with that. I think that we expect that a distance learner is going to somehow have that same environment, and they're not going to. And we can probably attest to that working from home, right? You're trying to work from home or trying to attend a conference. You have kids in the background. Just the general distraction of being at home, even if you don't have children there. The garbage trucks goes by, if the power goes out, you know, you need to have this person come over. I'm here, I'm going to switch the laundry around. And so when we are in the classroom face to face, we can create a space that doesn't have any of that. And students can go there. And so the structure they've built about how to be successful really is dependent upon that specific space. So that is a big difference. And we do have different expectations there. And I'm just reading about how people, like, they had students ghost them, they'd open the video feed, then go play video games, which they admitted right up front. And we had the situation with students just laying in their bed the whole time. And I know as a parent, I was very adamant that my children had to sit at a table because someone put a lot of effort into that. And I think that that's a part sometimes that's lost in that teacher-student relationship, is understanding how much effort, you know, gets put into creating these things. So, you know, when we talk about that and the expectations placed upon students, and they're not always necessarily the same with regard to learning and participating in the online classroom as they are in the face-to-face classroom. I think also sometimes there's a misconception that in the online classroom, well, it'll be easy. If you're someone who's nervous about speaking up in class, online, you can speak up all you want. And it doesn't actually work that way. You may not want to be on video. You may not, if you're a high anxiety person who doesn't like that type of focus on you, you're still probably not going to participate in chat. So typically we might reach out directly to that student in a face-to-face environment. We should be doing the same in our online environment. And we've already covered this last bullet, so I won't go super into it, but it's about considering those differences that exist, life, situational, educational, or socioeconomic needs in the backgrounds of students participating in online. We know that sometimes people are taking online courses, especially right now, and they don't have an appropriate computing device, and they may not have reliable internet, and they may not have housing or food security. And that's not just during COVID time, that's all the time. And so sometimes when we talk about learner needs and we talk about how to feel engaged and present, we say everybody should have their camera on. It's important to look at everyone, but that doesn't work for all students. And we have to keep that in mind also. And even without the camera, we can still form connections.
I think another challenge, this is Jeanette Fraguli, I'm the chair of the history department here at Carroll. I think another real challenge is, especially in some of my classes, like anything to do with gender, the students look at each other and we give them some pretty challenging things to read that can be a little bit uncomfortable, right? And they're looking to me, they're looking to one another to, not for validation, validation's the wrong word, but they're looking to see how their remarks resonate, and they're a little bit fearful and they have a little bit of trepidation. Whereas if they're all with me in the room, they can look at me. Right. And I can nod and, you know, say, yes, this is fine. This is a safe space. And I think sometimes people have this idea that they see the online environment as all safe because they're not there, you know, they're not all present at the same time. And I just don't think that's true. I think it's the opposite. I think they feel less safe in a lot of ways.
And that's not surprising when we look at, especially along age lines, and the rampant bullying that happens online. It's very easy, it seems these days, for people to attack one another from behind a keyboard and say things in a chat, in a forum, that you would never say to someone face to face. And so we tend to have a generation of learners who've been very conditioned to the fact that there's lots of nastiness and bullying online. Whereas like for my age group, we didn't have online. And even though you see it happen out there, it's not to the degree that I think younger learners experience today. And I think that does make them feel less safe, because when you're right there in the classroom, no one wants to be confrontational necessarily with their professor in the classroom. So they're not going to say something that's going to cause you to have to intervene. But online, it seems to be just, you know, completely freewheeling. People say whatever they want. And so I would agree with that. It is very difficult to establish that safe space in the online classroom.
Well, everything is digital as well. So anything that you say, any kind of goofy thing, or you know, what you wear, or you know, being in somebody's house, can be immediately put out to Instagram, Snapchat, you name it.
Right.
Yeah, the bullying just it's exponential. So
It
it's
is.
kind of deep.
And we did see that. We've seen that happen where people are taking a screenshot of the background in people's houses. Someone gets up and leaves and they forget to turn their camera off. And that's right out there on the internet. People think it's funny. They're going to make it their digital background in Zoom. There are so many things to consider that, you know, bring a lot of concern. I really liked the way that Ryan did last night's meetings. He did them as a webinar in Zoom. And so you could send messages in the chat, but you could not see anybody else or their backgrounds. And so the only communication that happened was through the chat. And I started to think that in certain classrooms where you might have a problem with some of that online bullying and just some of the dynamic, that might be a good approach to things, to cut down on some of that, to kind of pull that away from people. It means that you're not really seeing their faces, they're seeing yours. But, you know, there's a lot of trying to balance things in this environment.
I have a problem with that. One of my biggest issues was not seeing my students' faces. And I had one class that I think the last 4 weeks, I did not see most of them at all. And they turned their camera off, so I saw their icon. And I could only tell if they were still in the room if I said something to them and they answered, which interrupts class to have to constantly say, John, Leslie, Tyler, you know, and I would have to do that. I would go through a list and see if it was like I took attendance 4 times during class. And I want our school to institute that they are absent if their camera is off. That
creates lots of problems with equity, though. And so if I am someone...
we all have the same devices in our school.
No, equity as far as I may live in a house that I'm too embarrassed to show you. I may live in
I live in one of those. All I required is that I could see the top of their head. They could turn the camera so I could only see the top of their head.
It's interesting. So it's I know that there are people who want to push for that. I think I look at it like this, depending on, I guess, where you teach. If a student elects not to come to my course, my class, my online class, that's their right. They miss what I'm teaching. Maybe they don't get access to the recording, whatever the case may be. But if they don't come, maybe I reach out and I say, hey, you know, I haven't seen you in a while. Is there anything going on? But I also always take that as an option to reflect. Am I doing something that makes it not necessary for my student to come to my class? Perhaps I'm lecturing, you know what I mean, about something that maybe they don't need to. They can get it out of the book, so maybe they don't come. There is a comment in here about even if you have the same devices, sometimes for people when their camera is on, everything for them freezes. And you'll see people keep their camera off here too. And do the attendance thing. I definitely do some attendance checks from every now and then if it's a required course. There's lots of talk.
Well, if all they're doing is signing on and then going to get breakfast, they're never there again. And I would call that not presence.
They're not present, correct, but why?
They're not
right?
present.
Mhm.
Well,
And they
I think
don't
it's
come back.
important to I think it's important to develop maybe some questioning strategies that all students have to reply to in chat or in some form. Um,
Yeah.
Right.
Whether it's a thumbs up or it's a some kind of response.
Yeah.
That
That's
doesn't
better
do it.
even if it's still engaging with you and the content.
And there are some really important discussions here, one of which, and I, as a parent, I encourage my children to keep their camera covered at all times, and they are not allowed to turn the camera on even for school unless they have my permission and they're sitting in a very specific part of my home. And that is because I do not allow anything personally identifiable to be in any picture that they have. There's, internet issues, and that presence is reflected in their grades.
Well, I do understand all that, but I am specifically speaking of cases where those were not the issues. I know they weren't the issue. I live in a really small town. I know the families. The issue was they did not want to put on clothes in the morning, and they would say so.
Hold
They
on
didn't
one
want to
second.
comb their hair.
Jog out. And I think that that's quite frankly,
And it was very antisocial. I mean, I had an entire class I didn't even see. It's like, I don't see the reason for me to be there.
so I think I'm just going to make one final point on that, which is, I guess two. One, I think almost any of us is guilty of having turned on a webinar or a video and walked away and let it just play through because you had to get to the end of it and you didn't really want to do it. And the other thing is that regardless of where we live, the size of the town we live in, how much we think we know what's going on in a family, we don't always know.
Okay.
And ultimately that decision is
done.
up to the student, right? We want the student to be engaged, but we can't force engagement. So, all right. So engagement versus presence. When we talk about when people are engaged, we'll say, oh, they're posting in the discussion forums, we're responding to them, the students are completing their work, and they may ask you to repeat something. Oh, can you repeat that? You were going really fast, I didn't catch it. And sometimes we think those are questions, but they might not be. It might just be that we're moving too quickly or they need a little more time to process something. When someone is present, the discussion posts show more of a depth of understanding. And I talked about this in another session earlier, which was that sometimes we create discussion forums, and in those forums, we are trying to replicate seat time, and they tend to be busy work, and they're not really pulling that depth of understanding. So when someone is engaged, sure, hey, that was a great post. So glad that you said that, totally agree, right? When they're present, we start to see that real depth of understanding. They're questioning. They're saying, oh, you know what, I read something about that or heard something about that. Or do you remember when we talked about this? The instructor, when they're present, provides consistent and meaningful replies. So one of the things, and anyone who has been in an online course themselves has probably had a course where you've been there, you're posting a discussion forum, that instructor's completely MIA. And then at the end of the week, they show up and they're like, oh, well, you didn't mention this in your discussion forum or whatever. When you're providing consistent and meaningful feedback and replies, your students are more likely to do the same, and they feel like you're there versus there's just a computer behind this. And so this is where that whole concept of it takes a lot more time to teach an online course comes. While I do have canned responses, I always keep for my different forums that I can pop in and then personalize. That saves me a little time. I try to make sure that if I have a forum open for a week, I log in every other day to post a reply to a new student or follow up on maybe a question I had posed the previous time. And you will find that when you do that, it keeps that conversation going and they tend to be a little more engaged. I do think that sometimes when you've been able to teach someone in a face-to-face classroom, you transition online, you know a little bit more about them maybe. So when it's solely online, you have to kind of dig and pull to figure out, how am I going to capture their attention? How am I going to connect with them? And also when students are present, they ask questions that continue conversation and they demonstrate a deeper understanding, whether that's in an environment like this, through the chat, through a forum, or through some other mechanism. And so when we're all present, we truly feel like we have that working relationship with one another. And so I know that you can't control what the student chooses to do, and you can't necessarily control the ideals that they're at home with as far as their viewpoint toward online education. They may stay in bed because no one's ever told them not to, or they may turn it on and play video games because they've never really learned that when someone's speaking, you really have to pay attention, right? And we run into these, and you run into them in the classroom too, that kid who's always checked out in the back, or the one who needs to be in the bathroom all day. So it's still very similar, right? So some of those are similarities. So the presence that you bring matters, right? So when you develop a positive presence, it's going to increase engagement. So if when students are asking you questions, they feel like you're hostile toward them, they're not going to be asking you much. And when they feel like you're present, they have a reason to attend class. They want to be in class. And when your presence really sets the tone for the course and for their learning. And so I think like we can all think of a time that you have been in a situation either as a student or with a coworker who that person just seems miserable right from the get-go. They're always looking to argue with you. Their point is always right. When we come into the online classroom, we have an even smaller window to be able to show students exactly that we're the opposite. We want to welcome their ideas. We want them to bring their ideas in a respectful way. We want them to understand that even when their ideas are challenged, that's not a personal attack. We're all here to learn together. And that you want the student to always feel that their contributions are going to be recognized and valued, and they'll feel valued and validated. And when they feel that way, they will give more. And obviously we're all going to have different scenarios where this is different. And again, we have to pull the COVID time completely out of that because that is not a good representation of how all this works. So, you know, I come back to it over and over again when I talk about body language. You don't have the body language to provide your feedback to the student, and you don't have theirs to give you feedback either. And like, I know that most of us are guilty of, you know, you're on a video and you're just kind of very intently staring at it, which is different than when you're really like intensely listening to someone speak in a classroom. And so sometimes it just looks like you are just mean mugging, like unbelievable when you're on video camera, and the student may pick up on that, or you're looking at the student like, why are they so angry? They look miserable to be here. And it might not be that way, but it's a different interaction. And so I always do like to talk about that. And Rashida just made what was absolutely my next point, and it's something that is very, very, very important to me and in presence, which is you need to understand your students' key cultural, social, and emotional needs. When we are teaching face-to-face, we might meet a student, and oftentimes we can say culturally, these might be kind of here's kind of an umbrella term of things that we know. Maybe when the parents come, this is how a conference usually goes, or maybe they just have different socioeconomic needs. One of the things with online learning is that when we pivoted for COVID, you suddenly had students who did not have consistent meals that they might have had at school. They're hungry, they're tired, they're maybe caring for siblings. Their house is everybody's chaotic as ours, right? We are totally trying to manage my dog barking outside here. Normally it's the kids fighting. It's all these things. They're managing all of those things too. And so I think it's really important to know that you never truly know what's happening, but you need to be very sensitive and understanding and make a choice to really get to know your student in their different emotional, socioeconomic, and cultural needs to be able to reach them. Dave, I love that she made a cake. That's awesome. So sweet. So I love that Sasha's right in there too.
Do you see, Amy, that we had a question from Griffiths was the last name, about if you had any other examples besides discussion forums?
Hang on, can you read, do you have the question? Because you guys are super chatty in there.
I think it was Miranda, and maybe you want to unmute Miranda and clarify the question, but I think it was more about developing presence in other activities besides just discussion forums.
And we'll actually get into that. I'm going to go activity by activity and show you how we can develop some presence using different Moodle activities. Forum's always the first one that comes to mind. One cool thing about Forum is that you can post video in Forum using either the RTC recorder, or you can I use like, I have a YouTube channel, I do it unlisted, and I pop the link in because of the file limit size on Moodle. And so is your name Sabine? Sabine? Tell me how you say your name.
Sabine.
Sabine, perfect. Sabine, excellent question. So here is what I do. When I teach a class at the beginning of every week, I put a video of myself in there, and then I might not be able to pick up on the student's body language, but they can pick up on mine. So every week I post a welcome video. Hey, I'm so happy to have you here. Here's the things we're going to talk about this week. Last week, I'll bring up something that I think went really well the week before. Any questions that had come to me in email that maybe there was a common theme, I'll address those right there. I really make sure at the start of every week, they get a video from me. If I feel like throughout the week, I'm starting to notice that they're looking like they're having a rough time, or they're having a hard time engaging, or whatever the case may be, I might post another video. And sometimes I'll open up chat in Moodle so that we can just come in and chat back and forth, kind of like having the chat here in Zoom. And a real-time chat option is effective as well. It's different on the higher ed, where I was before, level, I think, than it is maybe if you're K-12 or professional development, in the sense that on higher ed, you might have a group of students that are kind of like your advisees, or that you meet with more regularly. So I was able to schedule more like one-to-one meetings, like we would use Zoom, and that would help me check in and kind of get a real feeling for how things were. But I really, really advocate for either posting in the forum at the start of every week, a video of you right in that forum that they're going to be posting in for the week. Make that the first post in there, and they can be replying from there. I think that's one of the best ways to kind of gauge some of those, the body language, at least their perception of your body language and your involvement in the course.
We did have a question come up regarding whether your videos are accessible each week.
They are. So this is one of the reasons I use YouTube, because I can turn the auto captioning on and then correct it so it's accurate. And then I make sure closed captionings are always on. Worst case, sometimes I'll type out what I want to say. So I have a transcript also that I can post. So, keep them you don't want them too long. I am a big advocate for everything needs to be under 5 minutes. I have a pretty short attention span most of the time. And so I try to think about that, like how long of a video am I actually going to watch? Probably not super long, but it doesn't take me a long time to establish a presence. So like if we had started this workshop and I was like, all right, let's get going, and I never stopped and I never asked questions, in the first 3 minutes, we would have lost more people than we've lost so far. But when you come in and in 3 minutes, you really have like high energy and you're really out there and really trying to connect with them, that's really all you need. And it's not as hard to transcript that if you have to. I definitely rely on closed captioning whenever possible. Just checking here.
One other question that came up.
YouTube privacy. I keep everything on YouTube unlisted, which means they can only access it with my link. And that's how I do things. If you have if you can manage the size of the files that students are making, like you have to be under this amount, or they can use the RTC recorder, then that's all kept in Moodle and you don't have to worry about that. But my outgoing stuff to them tends to be a little lengthier. So I do use my YouTube channel on an unlisted setting. And Zoom can also do a transcript that can be corrected. Yep. All right, we had somebody who wanted to say something. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say that we had a question quite a while ago come up if you were going to make your PowerPoint slides available.
Yes. Yep. I'll pop them right in the Moodle course. You can download them. I will tell you that if there's any content in this particular one that you want to use, please just make sure you cite me. This is covered under my intellectual property because it was based off of my own personal research. And that is my plug that I'm supposed to say when I say, yes, they're available. But please feel free to download them. This recording of this session will also be available. And then should anybody share resources in the chat, I will export the chat, take out all of the chat things, and only take the resources and pop them into a wiki or a forum when we're done as well, so that you have some takeaways from here.
Also, I just wanted to point out, I think on the Zoom transcripts, and maybe Lori Piccolo can clarify, because I know she's our accessibility specialist here at Idaho State, giving her a plug, but I think you have to have the cloud recording on to be able to use that. Or
Zoom?
Yes, for Zoom.
Probably.
Yes, that's
Yep.
that's true. That's how we have to do it.
And we
Mhm.
don't
agree.
have Zoom
You
cloud
don't have, like, a
recording on
corporate?
here because we have the some HIPAA requirements, I think.
Yeah, we have, and that is that there's always little caveats to if you have any kind of health sciences program, which at the previous place I worked was a school of nursing. Things like pre and post conference where students have gone into clinical and are then discussing patient care could not be recorded and saved for any purpose because it is a violation of HIPAA. Yeah, we ended up moving to a simulated online clinical for the very end of the semester. So that was no longer an issue because we weren't talking about real patients, but anytime there's the potential for discussing anything related to an actual patient, you would not be able to record that. The other thing that you can sometimes get in the weeds with or get, it's a bit of a gray area, is when you might be talking about certain types of lectures. You're talking about sexual assault lecture, or there's certain topics in religion or family abuse or health, and students start to share information. You would not want that to be in your recorded lecture. So you always have to be aware of those things if you do record your lectures. And Christine is talking about using Kaltura, which is a really cool plugin that functions great with Moodle for recording things. And they're using it at Montana Digital Academy too, Diane. And yeah, if only we could get Kaltura. I know, it's not everybody has it. All right, so we already talked about this bullet. I love this. This is a great session because everyone is really chatting. So, starting off strong, engagement and presence begin on or before day one. So sometimes if my students have access to my course, maybe like a couple days ahead of time, I post a welcome letter. My welcome letter is a very casual, getting to know me, but here are the course expectations. I try to keep it less from the perspective of I'm the teacher and you're the student, and more from we're all humans trying to take this course together. I always clearly communicate my course requirements at the very start or right before the start. This is what's expected for week one. Here's an overview of what you can expect for the rest of the course. These are the due dates. These are my policies. And that often comes in a separate letter than the welcome letter, and we will get into that as we go further. But I am very, very clear. Often these things go in the syllabus, which I explain to my students is a contract between the two of us, where we can both hold each other to the standards that are published in there. I always try to make sure that my students know right up front that I'm really invested in the class and their success. I let them know that I'm excited to be on this journey of learning with them, and I'm looking forward to all the great things that they're going to bring, their expertise and their experience. I always want them to know that I don't look at myself as that sage on the stage, but instead I'm a facilitator and I have as much to learn from them as they have to learn from me. And so it's about building the bridge right from the start, and how you start off really does help determine the tone. And so when I say, let's not look at COVID, we can't look at that as our litmus test for how well these things work, because it was a very sudden, rapid change, and not everyone had the resources to be able to do these things. So the welcome letter, like I mentioned, I post it either as a letter on a page, or I'll do it as a video with a transcript, or I'll put it in the forum. Either way, just make sure that it's accessible, a screen reader can get it, or it has closed captions and whatnot. I give a little intro. Hey, my name is Amy. I'm super excited to be here. I've been teaching this for a while. My background was in environmental science, and then I kept coming back to education. And so once I started to work in K-12, I realized I definitely wanted to be in education. Went back to school for a master's in elementary ed, but decided that was not for me. So I ended up getting pulled in to do accessibility checks on a Moodle course. Realized I loved instructional design. I loved everything about online learning. I thought it was fantastic. And away I went, got a master's in instructional design. I worked in higher ed for 6 years, and I've just transitioned into the corporate world, working as a client care analyst for eThink Education. That's my background. I tell them why I like teaching it. I love to teach this course because I think that your presence is super important. And I can remember being a student who absolutely hated school. It was the most painful experience ever for me growing up. And I really felt that a lot of that came back to not feeling like I had teachers who felt positive in the classroom, and that was in a face-to-face environment. But my 5th grade teacher changed my whole life. And that's when I knew I wanted to be in education, because he came in and he was positive and he said, listen, you're not allowed to sit in your chair and do nothing anymore. Here's the deal. And that was what I needed. And so these are the things I talk about in my letter, and I make it very conversational so that they know that I'm a person, I'm a human behind this. I am not just a teacher. I am not just like, you're going to do this and these are the grades. I tell them what I'm looking forward to. I give a very clear, concise rundown of the course, sometimes in my welcome letter. Other times, yay, 5th grade teachers, I'll tell you, that was the best year of my life. Other times I'll do a screencast video walkthrough of how to navigate the course. And I'll pop that in week 1. So they or in the top part under getting started, so that they know how to get through things, where to find things. So that's what my welcome letter and my welcome at the very start of a course looks like. Anybody have anything they want to add or talk about there? No, all right.
Okay, not so much on the positive presence end, but the exact same applies when you've got a negative presence, classroom or
Absolutely.
online.
Mm-hmm.
My husband was all classroom, but he had some teachers who were really horrible, and he is kind of anti-education because of it.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't go to college because he didn't feel like he was valued.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't show our students that they're valued, they know it.
Absolutely. They pick up on it extremely quickly. I often, I have 2 children. One of my children is gung-ho, loves school. He has just like a really bubbly personality. My other child is a little more, he's more of an introvert. And so it takes more to bring him out of his shell. And his body language sometimes, I think, is off-putting to people. They feel like he's just not into it, but he has never had, they've had 2 different teachers for most of the time. But it wasn't until this year, his 5th grade year, where he had a teacher who really just made that difference for him, who made him feel valued, and all of his little hyper interests he has in little areas, his teacher really made an effort to ask him about those and kind of loop that into some of the projects he did. And it was the very first time he felt truly validated in school. And it changed everything. It changed his whole outlook on education as a whole. And so it really does make a difference when you come in with a negative presence, and it's easy to get pulled into that negative space, especially particularly when if you don't have an administration that's very supportive of you, or you're finding it very hard to connect with parents or whatever, especially on those lower levels. Very difficult. Sabine sent an awesome video link there about validating who students are in school. And I'll talk about this. I think this is really important to talk about, which is that it is really important that as we look at society today, we recognize that there are different cultures, races, and socioeconomic groups in our country who have historically been disenfranchised and marginalized in the education system. On a very broad scale, we could say, if we look at students in affluent neighborhoods who have all of these resources in the schools, and students who come from socioeconomically disadvantaged schools who don't have a book in the library, how education has taught students overall, the systemic higher administrative portions of education have taught students that depending on your race, your culture, and your economic standing, you may or may not be worth anything to the education system. So that is another thing that you have to overcome, particularly when teaching online, I think, because you aren't there to reach out necessarily to students, and you don't always know the history of what's gone on with your students. And so very important to validate your students and their experience and their lives and the things they bring to your classroom to form that relationship with students, and to make sure that you are not furthering the disparity in education. It's a topic it just gives me it's really something that I'm passionate about. And I think that we're in a time where it's becoming more and more clear. And I think when we work together in sessions like this, we have a better chance of making sure that we're all moving in the right direction and making sure that everyone is treated equitably in education.
How do you think online teaching has affected people with dyslexia? Because so much of it is reading.
Right. So there are some special fonts that are available for students who have dyslexia. can't remember, and there may be someone in this session who can answer this, but I thought that there was like a language pack in Moodle. Maybe not, I could be confused, that has the dyslexia the text font for people who have dyslexia. I would say though that especially when you get into higher ed and people you don't necessarily know if your students have dyslexia or any type of disability, because it's not like in K-12 where it's reported and then it follows them. They don't have to tell you. That you always have to be cautious that you are kind of educating yourself about what some of those warning signs might look like, making sure that you're reaching out to students, letting them know who your disabilities coordinator is up front, and that they can privately contact that person, that there are resources available. That's a really great question. I really think that that is something that if someone were doing research, I would love to see some research on how highly text-based courses are affecting students who have disabilities related to reading comprehension, language processing, and dyslexia. Great question.
I do have a question as well.
Yes.
When at the beginning, like I like the whole welcome letter, but in a situation where you, in face-to-face, right away the first day, you're able to stand next to the door, you're able to welcome your kids, you're able to show them that, those facial expressions and being able to welcome to get them comfortable. What are some ways that you could do in the online way?
So I tend to take, like when I do the introduction form, I'll then pop a direct email to a student, or I will send them a link to a video I created just for them. So maybe I'll be like, hey, Rashida, I am so glad that you posted the welcome forum this week. I also have kids in the background, or I also really like to do, maybe they shared something about themselves. I think your background is really interesting, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you. And I will email them the link to that personal video that I made for them. So they get that one-on-one hello. And that is hard, but it needs to be 45 seconds or less, just like it would be at your door. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a great year this year, whatever the case is. However you normally would do that, you can do it in a really short video that you just pop to them in an email. That I think can work. You can even send it in Moodle message if you're not able to email back and forth with your students. It's not a clickable link. They would just copy and paste it somewhere. But that's one way to make that connection. That was a great question. All right, so just going to check our time here. We're about an hour in. Before we get into course navigation, and Mandy, I want to talk about that in a second, because I experienced something very similar, and I think many people may have. I want to take like a 5-minute break so everybody can, go to the bathroom, get a drink, do whatever you need to do, stretch. These are some pretty long sessions. So let's meet back here at 4 o'clock Mountain Time. Oh, sorry, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, which is 2 o'clock Mountain Time. And you'll have to try to figure that out wherever else you live. And we'll reconvene here with some course navigation stuff. All right. So we will be back in just a minute. Sasha, do you want to pause the recording during that time?
Yes, I can do that. And then Solange brought it to my attention that Hart has her hand up. So did you have a question, Hart? Sorry.
The spacebar did not unmute me. So let me video too, so you can get the whole effect. I just had a follow up on the greeting kind of thing, but we can do that when we come back, or I can just be with it.
You know what? Why don't you do it now? Because we'll move on to a different topic when we come back. So let's do it now, and then we'll take our break right after that.
Okay. I was just going to bring Moodle back into the picture here with, I'm teaching a course right now for faculty on key connections with connecting with their students, and students to students, and students to contact. And one of the things that I did was I sent out a quick mail message. If you're using quick mail in Moodle, one of the things that you can do now is that you can take, there are fields that appear at the bottom of the page that you think, what is all this code? Why is it here? But if you copy the code, you can actually personalize a message so that it uses their first name, for instance. It also you can drop in the name of the course. You can drop in, I just sent them a message last week saying, hey, so-and-so, I just posted this thing. You can see it in our course, posted the name in there so they could go, they knew what I was talking about. And by the way, the last time you accessed the course was blank, and all that information in. And that personalization drives responsiveness. And so I had like 5 faculty respond in the first 24 hours, which normally maybe one person would have. So it really works. And I have one of the faculty in the course said, you know, you showed us how to do that. I used it with some students that I had last year, and I sent them this message, and I heard back from all of them. So
Awesome.
that personal connection really makes a difference. I'm also going to post a link in the chat about liquid syllabus, which is more of a higher ed thing, but it's a very cool way. Michelle Brock talks about, she has like a welcome package, which is a Google site that she's created. And she has a video on it, and she has all this information about the course, and it's just really cool.
Awesome.
So,
thank you so much for sharing.
That's
Thanks, Hart.
You're
Sabine,
welcome.
yes, so in the upper right-hand corner, for those who haven't used Moodle Message yet, in the upper right-hand corner, near where your picture might go, your profile, you should see 2 things. One looks like a speech bubble, and the other one probably looks like a bell. The speech bubble is your Moodle Messenger, and so you can message in there, depending on the settings set by your administrator, you may be able to message everybody in your course or perhaps site-wide. I have site-wide shut off in higher ed because it's not necessary per se, but also because my particular students are all enrolled in one specific course. So like we have it all set there, but if we were ever to go into more of a cohorted thing, I wouldn't want everybody being able to message each other necessarily. And some installations might block messaging. Some of that is dealt with on your admin end. I'm a big fan of Moodle Message. I really like it. The quick mail block is super popular right now. Just being able to have those one-on-one connections with students is super important. So, all right, we're gonna take a break. We'll actually come back at 2:05 Mountain, and which would be 4:05 Eastern, which is where I am. And Troy, if you could actually Moodle message me a link directly to the course you're teaching on Friday, I would like to be able to post that as an announcement in our Moodle course for this. If you are offering a session that you feel is related to this in any way or might help clarify some things for people, send me a Moodle message. I want to put a collection of upcoming sessions for people because it can be a little cumbersome trying to navigate through all of Moodle to figure out what people are kind of talking about. And then Troy also posted Loom, which is a really awesome tool that I'm hearing tons about right now. So, all right, guys, so we'll just stop the recording now, Sasha, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes. I'll see you guys shortly. Whenever you're ready, you can hit record. Perfect. All right, so now that we've had our break, we can kind of get into some more of the elements that help us to build a presence in our classroom. So far we've talked about needing to build that bridge early on, and the welcome letter is one way to do that. The next is explaining course navigation. The first day in your online course is much like arriving in a city that you have never been to and you don't know how to navigate. You just need to know what's the most important things for me to know and how can I find things. So I show my students, I don't tell them, I don't say, you'll find this in the syllabus. I post just a little screencast video of me walking through the class from the point of login. And I have my courses laid out in the order that they should complete each thing each week. So if they just start at the top, they can work from the bottom. I explain that in my walkthrough. But I start with the top section and I show them that if they click on this, it does that. The syllabus can be found here. My syllabus is always in a book, so they can flip through the book. It's an ebook, a Moodle book. And so I definitely show them what to do as opposed to just sort of telling them. So sometimes we feel like we could just put some written instructions out and we do that, but the written instructions don't always help, right? And Melanie said, find the worst part of town. It's not deliberate. She just happens to end up there. Often this happens. The students just don't get to the right place in the course. But if you give them a little video tutorial and you talk about where they can find course announcements, where the grade book is, the layout of the course, and a rundown of what's expected in the first week, it really goes a long way with them and helping them to feel comfortable in the class. When you feel comfortable someplace, then you're more likely to reach out, to talk, to engage, and to be present. When you don't feel comfortable and you feel like every time you go in, it's a mess and you don't know what to do and you feel frustrated, you're not going to come back. And I think that we can probably relate to that when we think about, you know, when we're given some new software to use and we aren't really given a lot of training, and it's very frustrating and very time consuming. And that can make us less likely to want to use that and instead rely on our old way of doing things. So Libby asked, do you guys split your Moodle courses into pages by category, lecture slides, homework assignments, or do you have it all on one mega page? So Libby, what I do is I use weeks in my courses that run along a specific time frame. They start on this day and they end on that date. And then each week, the week that they're current in, will get highlighted in blue, and I can set weeks to auto open. And I also set it up so that it's one topic per page. So when they come in, they see a collapsed version of all of the different topics, like week 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's week 4, they click on it, that opens for them, and they can see only what they need for that week. I arrange mine in the order I want them to do things. I have learning objectives for the week on the top, followed by their reading for the week, any pre-lecture work I want them to do, information for the actual lecture, and then any post-class work. Diane said she uses weeks, but she also knows that some people go with units and modules, and some do other units and modules. We actually, if we have a unit that carries over multiple weeks, it will say unit 1, the week, and then what the very specific part of the unit is that will cover that week. And then the next week might say unit 1 continued, so that they know. Because when we post our work, a lot of times when I put the work out, it's broken down by unit. So unit 1 covers these topics, and these are the evaluations for that unit. And so that does work well for students. Found I really like one topic and grid format to better organize. And I think a lot of that is kind of up to you and what you think works for you for the type of content that you're putting out. When you have an asynchronous course, you would use topics versus weeks because you're not really highlighting the week or anything. And then you don't necessarily, you can change the course start and end dates and the sections and things like that a little more easily. So Ellen, I don't use the course completion block in my courses because it's just not something that we necessarily need, not the block anyway. They do get to see some completion things. It does change. It does mess that whole thing up though. So like they could complete all of week 1 and 2 isn't open yet and it's still only telling them they're 50% complete. So that does make them, which it really should anyway, but when 2 opens and they finish that, then you know, it just continues to nick away at that percentage complete. But as some things do become available or have added things, it changes all of that again. So hiding future content is helpful for lots of reasons. It definitely gives you time to keep working on things. I know that we tend to be in a just-in-time culture all the time. So it definitely helps you with that, but it also can keep your students more focused on what you're doing right now, which I think is really helpful. And Troy must have said something super awesome up here. Put units in reverse order and hide the future ones. This way the latest are always at the top. Yep, that's another good way to do things. So Troy just he builds his class from the bottom up. And then each week when the new one opens, it's the most recent one is actually on the top for topics. So they don't have to scroll past the old ones, which is a really, really cool way to organize your course. Troy is like, if Troy knows all these super amazing things to do with Moodle, so he is definitely your person to reach out to. So normally we would do the breakout right here. And so what the breakout session is, and I'll have Sasha automatically put you into some breakouts, is this breakout, you're gonna just choose a name for your breakout group. And then you will add this name to your posts. So what you're gonna do, when I say you'll add this name to your posts, what will happen is I have to actually think about what the breakout I designed is. We should look, but I think I had a forum in there. But basically we're gonna come back and verbally report. But later on, if you wanna add to a wiki or a forum that I put in there with what you did in your breakout so that it is shared just in that area, you can do so. But you're gonna brainstorm one activity you will use to begin establishing your presence in your online classroom. So as a group, you're gonna say, I think we should do this one. And then you're gonna give some ideas about the activity your group has chosen. So what the activity or resource, what the Moodle activity or resource you'll use is, why you chose that method, what elements you'll include in the activity, and some pros and cons of that particular activity type, and what advice you'd give to other groups who wanted to use it. So if you said, I'm going to use a forum, and we chose this method because of this, this is what we're going to include in there. Maybe you're going to put a video or an audio recording and the pros and cons of it. And then you'll come back and you're going to share here. One person per group will share, so that we kind of have a record of what are some different ways we can start our course off. What are the different ideas people have? Because that's really how all of this works, right? We're just really here to share these great ideas that we have kind of bouncing around in our head, and get them out. And so then that way we'll have a collection of different topics. Troy, we'll see you later. And ideas, and you'll be able to come back to this video and rehash those. And like I said, I will put up a wiki or a forum where you all can post some of this later on, and then that way you always have it. So Sasha's just going to randomly break you guys up into breakout rooms. We're going to take 15 minutes in our breakout room, and then when those are done, 15, 20, whatever she set it for, and then you'll all get kicked back into here. All right, so go ahead, enjoy your time in your breakout rooms, and we'll see you all shortly.
So it looks like we'll have 14 per room.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of, we have about 100 and something people here, so yep.
I will just do it randomly. So I'm going to open all rooms, and you all should receive a message. And then Amy, how long did you say?
We'll do 15 minutes.
Okay. I'll start a timer. And then I asked my colleague Lance about the recording with the breakout rooms, and he said it will follow me. So
Okay, perfect.
do you want me to join any meeting or breakout rooms, or do you want me to just pause the recording? Or?
Yeah, I don't record the breakout room, and it's okay if we don't, because everyone will come back and do a group report out. So, perfect.
I've resumed recording.
All right, great. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to move to where we do some group report outs. So you all will be able to have one person, hopefully you kind of settled on who that would be, to tell us a little bit about what your group did. When you get put into the breakout rooms automatically, we don't actually see kind of who's in which group. So you just kind of have to decide that you're going to be the one to go. So who would like to go first? Or if you knew your group number, if you're group 1, you could go first, I guess. Or if you would like to just volunteer to be first, we would love that as well. Oh, Diane said that they needed more time.
I don't mind going first. I don't mind going first.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, so we were group 2, and our group talked about 2 different applications, and we would love to hear some experience from those of you who've worked with either of these. We started by talking about Flipgrid. It's great because it's engaging. It's the teacher can create an introductory video, and then each of the students would have a 30 or 45-second response to that. Really easy to use on mobile. And although it's not native to Moodle, it can be embedded in Moodle. And we love that the video introduction humanizes all of us. It makes the experience feel like an authentic connection, even though it's not synchronous. But we also talked about the application Poodle, Poodll, which does something similar. I've never personally used it, but I've been told that it integrates well with assignment, so it's a little bit easier to grade. And no one has heard complaints about how it works for student mobile devices and things like that. So we're thinking it works well for that. we were talking about cons as well. Once again, that accessibility issue, if a student doesn't have a smartphone or doesn't have good connection then that could be a problem for them. And also, one of the panelists in our group was talking about click fatigue and how students get so tired and so confused of going back and forth from this module to that module and trying different things out, and they're already pretty overwhelmed. And we also wondered if there was a need for pre-screening these videos that students are posting, and if there's a capacity for the teacher to pre-screen on either Poodle or Flipgrid. We didn't know the answer to that.
That's a really great question, and that is an important one. Just because sometimes what one person thinks is not inappropriate is just totally not appropriate for the setting. So yes, it looks like good idea. Yes, you can on Flipgrid.
That's all I had to report. I was just interested
Awesome.
in other people's feedback on those particular two.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kim. Those are some really great ideas you all had.
I know that my colleagues use Flipgrid constantly, and yes, you definitely can be able to screen them before you show them.
Very good. That is super key. Thank you for sharing that, Rashida. That is really important for us to know. I'm so glad when people have like the experience with some of the tools and they can share those questions that we don't know.
The teachers that I've talked to who use Flipgrid say their students, for the most part, really love it. And even the ones who are resistant to it at first, they pick it up and love it after.
Flipgrid is also a great way to differentiate and to be able to meet actually all needs. When you think of EL, your SPED kids, your remedial students, it's definitely a way to get them talking, and you're able to apply all 4 areas of speaking, listening, being able to communicate with writing and all that.
And I'm not positive, but we were thinking that Flipgrid is free, whereas Poodle comes with a bit of a cost.
It is. As of now, it is.
Don't
know what happens, but yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of stuff that started out free recently is no longer free. So that is a good point. And that's actually really important to know, especially because we all know that we're all in the same boat with like limited budgets. It's just getting worse. So, all right. So next group, who would like to share next for us?
I can go next for group 4.
Perfect. Thank you.
Which we titled For the Win.
Love it.
So we were thinking about doing a video introduction as a combo of introducing yourself as well as how to navigate the course. So sort of those first day in class type of deals. And in order to show the students how to submit assignments and navigate the course, they can submit a little about me type of assignment or video as a demo for how they would submit any, regular assignment. And so the goal of that would be to tell them about yourself, like you would in a classroom, have a video with, showing your face so that they see you, and then use that as a lead-in to show them how to navigate the course. And then we realize that the cons of videos are sometimes the students just don't watch them. So we would make that little assignment be worth a few points to incentivize them, and would also be required through the course completion to complete it before they could move on to anything else in the course. So just be, they're giving you a little bit, or if you give your students surveys at the beginning of the course, you could have them do a survey, and it's just participation points.
Very cool. Awesome. I like the participation points because I think when you incentivize things, you definitely have a better chance of them doing things, and there's really nothing wrong with having some incentive to it, I think. And we have in the comments, give them an option to use an avatar. Absolutely. Some really cool stuff in here. All right, very cool. Thank you so much. All right, next, who would like to share next?
We're not sure what group we were. I'm going to go ahead
Totally
and say
fine.
14.
Whatever.
We did talk a little bit about Padlet at first, but sort of simplified it right down to just a discussion forum again, and just posting, you know, a picture of oneself and a bit of an introduction and maybe a question to then get another student to answer and sort of get that communication flowing between the students and the instructors. And really just because that was already built into Moodle and we didn't have to bring in another something not native to your Moodle, sorry. Room 1, nope.
We had a 1 in it. You're fine.
Other than that, I kind of just froze and forgot everything else I was going to say. So discussion forum was our, the only problem we had with discussion forums was the fact that it just seems to get overused a lot in online classes. Almost every topic has a forum of some sort. I'll call it done.
All right. I would agree with that. I think that discussion forum just gets, it's the old phrase, beating a dead horse. It just gets way overused, and it often like gets used for busy work. And so it really kind of invalidates it sometimes as an effective teaching tool, because people are like, oh my gosh, another forum. Like, I'm so sick of like forums. So definitely that can be one of the cons of using it. But again, what you do in your course can hopefully change that tide. So like, hopefully you're not doing, 3 forums a week or whatever the case may be. So very cool. Awesome.
That's actually a great segue to group 7.
Awesome.
If I may.
Yes.
We decided to call ourselves the 7 Wonders. And just to mix it up and do a forum without it not really being a forum, we talked about doing a glossary and having each student do an entry introducing themselves. And we were merging a couple of really creative ideas that different group members had. They could create a license plate, like what their license plate would be, and explain what that would be, or a voice thread, a link to a voice thread, which I'm not completely familiar with. So if Sarah wants to jump on, I think she contributed that. The pros of this would, or they could just type text in introducing themselves, but the benefits would be there'd be multiple options, so different means of expression for different users. And it would also serve to get them familiar with glossary if that's something you're going to use later on. And the cons, it's multiple steps we're talking about using, so depending on your learners. And we ultimately, though we were in different places, said we're mostly with adult learners, but you would want to model what you're doing and be explicit with your instructions, provide clear step-by-step instructions, and demonstrate it to start.
Very cool. Awesome. I like that.
I have a question. What would the license plate idea look like? I mean, is it like a, what some people call it,
Rashida is going to jump on and give you some details on that because she does this, I hope.
I'm here, but my daughter is being a little loud, but.
I'm sorry.
So what was the question? Can you repeat that again,
What's
please?
the license plate? Could you elaborate on the license plate activity you do?
The license plate is basically a way to represent themselves, and it is a way to teach abbreviation. So they would choose up to three words that are related to, for like my subject area, I teach ELA, so it would relate to ELA. It's either a goal or something that they really admire about the class that they want to be able to do. So for example, I gave the example of love reading. So they would abbreviate love to LV, and then reading RDG, and that would be their license plate number. And then they would have to design their license plate with 3 things that represent them. And it could be in symbol form, it could be in picture form, that decorates the license plates. And that is it.
That is really cool. I really like the innovation and the fact that you validate your students by really just telling me something about you, things that represent you, but then you bring in that ELA piece to it. Very, very cool. Super awesome. All right, next group. I think we had like, I don't know how many groups, 10 groups maybe. So who would like to go next?
Well, I'll go next for, we decided to name our group Breakout Room Number 6. That was very original. We worked on that for most of the time. No, I'm just kidding. We talked about a lot of things. I appreciate the fact that so many of the groups went right into all the different tools, tech tools that you could use. We did come up with discussion forums being used because it was something that could be used through all levels at any type, like if you're going to do a discussion at a lower level, like K6, then that looks a certain way. If you're going to do it, 9-12, that looks a certain way. If you're going to do it for adult learnings, that's different. If you're going to do it for graduate studies or something like that, it looks differently, but it's still all the same tool, and it's the same thing that we could use throughout, because we had a very diverse group of people in our group, and that's what we struggled on, is like what can be used all the way through for regardless of the type of learner that you have. We did also talk about badges, and we had one teacher that teaches adult learners that have to, that are required to do like 16 hours of a certain type of learning each year based on their jobs. And the badges may be some type of way to engage them and have them connect better online if there's some type of system that they can like move to the next point or something like that based on their badges. So
awesome. Badges are strangely motivating. I agree, Hart. Like every time I hear about badges, I'm like, that sounds so exciting for whatever reason.
It sounds exciting, but
you have to make them.
Yes, because it's a lot of work.
Yes, and badges, probably something we'll mention it because we're talking about badges. They can't be carried over from course to course. You have to recreate them. There's kind of a whole like import export before anyone's been awarded a badge that sometimes is a workaround that's on the Moodle docs but doesn't always work. But badges become uniquely tied to the individual course, so you're recreating them for each course, which can be extremely cumbersome. Hopefully there'll be some movement and changes for badges. There's lots of things on the tracker about Moodle Tracker, if anyone's familiar with that. It's a place where you can go and kind of put in bugs that you find for Moodle, and there's some stuff in there about them wanting to update badges. Other thing about badges is that in Moodle 3.9, which is just coming out, there is some increased functionality for being able to export your badges to a badge backpack, which would allow you to make them, you carry them with you kind of forever. They're a digital credential. So especially when you're looking at like college or technical or professional development type work, the badge can contain within it the credentialing, like what you had to do to earn that credential. So it becomes like a mobile certification. Yeah, moot coin, super motivating. Yes, so very cool. And Hart has posted her practice course, which also offers 2 badges. And once again, what I'll do is I'll be exporting the chat here and copying and pasting all these links into a centralized resource for you in our Moodle class, so you do have them. So yeah. All right. Any other groups to report out? I think we must have like maybe 1 or 2 more. Anybody else want to go or no? All right. So if everybody's done and you're done reporting out, we will move on. And people are definitely talking about the competition. Yes, the competition can get pretty heavy with MootCoin. And it's face-to-face. In years past, we have had a mooter who counterfeited the moot currency in order to trick the system, which is how we ended up with MootCoin and a cryptocurrency, because they're able to change the value and you cannot counterfeit it anymore. And Solange just posted a link to the leaderboard for MootCoin now. So if you are super motivated and know who you want to beat, you can. And I definitely encourage you all to visit the store where you can see what you can spend your MootCoin on. And there is, I believe, the ability to gift MootCoin. So there'll be options, things that you can bid on, like an auction. Typically, when we do this face-to-face, there is a large silent auction where you're bidding your different MootCoin and your money on all kinds of items. And then we have a live auction where it's like Ryan acts as an auctioneer and he actually auctions things off. And so you start to see alliances form, and like, if you don't bid on this, then I won't bid on that, and money changing hands and all kinds of things. So it is a really motivating and competitive way to both keep the conference fun and encourage participation. All right, so self-efficacy and respect for students' time. I am really big on self-efficacy. You know, there's all these cliches. I tend to bring them in here, these little phrases, the like, you know, teach a woman to fish, teach a man to fish, that whole thing. I like to be equitable in how I put that out there, teach a person to fish. Here's the deal though. Ultimately, I'm going to do better in a class if I feel like I have the resources to not have to come and ask you every 5 minutes how to do something, even though it doesn't seem that way, because you definitely have students who reach out to you literally for everything. Every week, where do I find the assignment? Where do I find the reading? When I think about how to build self-efficacy in a course, I think about how my presence can make that happen. Yes, Melanie, I also hate fish, so it is problematic. So self-efficacy will allow students to seek and find information on their own. That doesn't happen overnight, and a lot of times you may get a student into your class who has prior to this not been taught any self-efficacy, and so they are seeking out just answers. Just tell me what I need to know. I don't want to have to go find it myself. But in a self-effective state, that's where learning happens, because if I don't know, I can go find it. And I'm not afraid to look around, and I'm also not afraid to just put myself out there and try things. So the students feel very invested in their course when they feel like they're self-effective, like they could find things if they need it. They don't always have to reach out to the teacher or try to ask the question. And they feel the students truly do feel their instructor's invested in them when the instructor kind of teaches them how to stand on their own 2 feet and find things themselves. Now, it will not feel that way at first, especially with some younger students or certain types of students. We always have the student who just has different needs, and they're more of a student who needs to, they just really want to talk to somebody, and their way to talk to you is to keep asking you where to find things. So sometimes you just have to redirect and have the conversation, but let them know where to find the resources. Yes, teach a person in Moodle and they will Moodle happily. That is exactly it, Stephanie. So I respect students' time, and then when I respect their time, it shows that I respect them as a person who has a life, who has responsibilities, and who has needs outside of the classroom. Yes, we would love when a student is in our classroom that their time is completely devoted to us and they spend all the time doing the reading that we assign and all the assignments we assign, but the reality is that's not life. There's a lot going on in students' lives, and so we have to recognize that we do have to keep within the confines of the hours of our courses, not overload students, but respect their time. And so I respect their time by making sure that I've given them a little course tour, outlining my expectations in advance, and they're all there. They're not having to hunt that down. They're not having to come to me. And as much as we don't like having students wasting our time with their nonsensical repeated questions or questions that don't need to be asked, we must also not waste their time with long-winded explanations, busy work, or unclear, ambiguous instructions. So one of the ways that we can promote self-efficacy is to make sure that our instructions are extremely concise, to the point, and very, very clear. And sometimes you might have to bounce them off of someone because they seem super clear to you. You know what you want. You know what you want them to do. And so when you're really, really familiar with something, it actually makes it much more difficult for you to ask. It makes it more difficult for you to write an instruction because you don't need the instruction. It's kind of like when we write quiz questions and we know the material inside and out, and we write this quiz question, then we can't figure, why did they get this wrong? This is so simple. And then someone who doesn't know the material reads it and they're like, wow, the question was kind of confusing. But it wasn't to us because we knew it really well. So it's the same thing with students. I try to be really clear with my instructions, very concise. I don't waste their time. I don't put a forum in just for the sake of having a forum to make up seat time for that week. Everything has a purpose. And I think that's a really important thing to remember when you're creating presence. If you're respecting the fact that students don't have all day to spend in your class, and they don't have all day to like try to figure out your instructions, and they do have a life outside the classroom, it really goes a long way with them feeling validated and respected as a person. in your class. And, you know, you talked about these questions are often an opportunity for connection. Yes, but sometimes I try to redirect. Like if it's a question they keep just asking me the same question, I recognize they really just want to connect with me. And so that's kind of what I was getting at there, was that you have to walk the line of knowing your student. If your student is asking you every week, hey, where do I find the reading? And it's always in the same place. They don't need to know where the reading is. They need a connection. They need you to reach out and be like, hey, just wanted to make sure, and you could be preemptive. Hey, just wanted to make sure that you're on track for the reading this week. Just checking in to see how you're doing. You know, is there anything that I can do to support you? Hey, how is your pet, your new baby sibling, your whatever you could ask them about that you know about them. That's a good time, because a lot of those questions really are students seeking a connection. When you make them self-effective, then when they come to seek the connection, they'll just seek the connection and not try to veil that with other questions, like, you know, the same one every week. All right, so the ways that I try to build self-efficacy is that I'm very clear about communicating timeframes. I clearly state those expectations for any work to be completed within a time frame, and I do that in multiple ways. I try to, and we talked about, and this was perfect because the examples that you gave really show this. So I will give an overview of exactly what the work is. I usually put it in the syllabus in a book. I just make a table there using the Moodle book module. And then in my weekly video that I post, I'll say, these are your timeframes for this week. But it's very clearly stated. They get it in more than one place, and it's always the same between the two places. Yeah, the book, I love the book, Melanie. Concrete due dates. So I include the day, the month, the year, and the exact time. And I do the time, and I never make the time midnight, because that is super confusing apparently to like the majority of the world. When I say midnight on, you know, July 15th, like that already happened. So I always do 11:59 p.m. because that seems to make more sense to people. Even if I do 12:01 a.m., I feel like people get very confused. So if it would have been like midnight, I always back it up to 11:59 p.m. And I am very specific. Must be submitted no later than Thursday, the 22nd of February at 11:59 p.m. And that's all. I don't get into more flowery language with that, but I make sure that it's extremely concrete and exact for them. Don't get into the, well, as you know, I have like a 5-minute grace period. Don't even do it. Just give them the concrete date.
Occasionally Moodle will do a weird thing with due dates where you say 11:59 and what the message it gives says is kind of hinky.
Yeah.
I've talked to a couple of people who are just like, well, I said this, but Moodle's telling something
different.
That's not the same. And I'm just like, it's the same. It
is.
Flipped.
You have to trust me. Yes. Are you talking about like the month and the day?
No, I'm trying to remember what it was. There was one specific thing where it was, you know, due on a specific time, and Moodle was giving a message. Oh,
Yeah,
it's after this time. And he was just like, no, it's not about after the time. And I'm just like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Doing what you want.
Right. And so some of it is when you have students change their time zone, or if your server is set to UTC time, which can be the default, that makes it like just crazy pants. It gets all wild. So you just have to double check your server times. And sometimes it will say your assignment is late if it is submitted on or after, and it gives them a thing. And I don't actually, but it doesn't happen all the time. So I know what you're talking about. If you have a late policy, make it very clear. And I usually post it in every individual assignment, and it's also in the syllabus, which is our contract. Credit will be deducted for late assignments is not clear. Credit will be deducted for late assignments. Like, okay, but what's late and what's credit? So I'm very specific. 5% of the earned grade will be deducted for each day the assignment is late. And then I give an example. For example, if you earned a 100 and submitted one day late within X 0 to 24 hours, whatever your deal is there for lateness, your grade will be a 95. If you achieved an 80 and submitted 2 days late, it will be 10% off of 80, which is 16%. Some people, theirs might say 5% off the maximum grade. So it's 5% off that 100, just knock them down 5 points. Whatever your specific late penalty is, make it exceptionally clear. And I'm sure like many of you have run into this where there's lots of bartering and trying to like manipulate the late penalty statement. And this applies to the teacher tool too. So you want to tell your students exactly how long they should wait for their grades or feedback. And if you can't meet that, reach out to them and let them know, hey everyone, I thought I would have everything graded by Friday, running behind this week. The new date for the release of grades is Monday at 3 p.m. Yes, everyone does want to negotiate. But so if we would expect them to let us know that their work is going to be late, they should be able to expect that we're going to let them know that we're going to be late and meeting our deadline, because you know how the grade book goes. They're just like waiting. They love that grade book, and they will keep checking. So just be preemptive. Let them know exactly when things are going to be returned for feedback. And Jenny talks about late work is outlined in her rubrics. It made her life much easier, but she doesn't grade after a week later until the end of the semester. So yeah, so there's lots of different, in the midterm, there's lots of different things that we do, just as long as we're being very clear. That's really important for establishing a presence. Then they know that you're there. It's always there. It's a non-negotiable. You've said it to them. They have something concrete. Syllabus is one of the things that I am very passionate about when it comes to both presence and course design. Your syllabus design should be something that allows your student to determine what's actually being emphasized. And in turn, if they know what's being emphasized, they'll know how to focus their studying. If they don't know where to look, if they know where to look, they'll look. If they don't know where to look, they're just going to come to you and things are going to get very confusing all the time. My syllabus is always a contract, and I set it up in a book. You've heard me say book lots of times. I love the book module. And I'm able to really, really set things up well there and organize them well, so that if a student just wants to know what is the late policy, they can click on the chapter late policy and that's all they see. They're not sifting through lots of information.
Can we see an example
Of a syllabus? I'm trying to think if I have one on my temp course. I will post one for you because I have it in a live course right now that would give you access to student names if we went in, just because of a block I have on the side. So I will definitely post one for you. I'll just import a syllabus for you. But basically I just set it up. The front page of the book says syllabus for this course. Please note, faculty reserves the right to make amendments to the syllabus at any time with notification to students. So if we have to change anything, we can. And I go through the course policies, the grading and stuff. I'll definitely pop one into the course for you all. Let me just write it down so that you can have an example. Interactive syllabus is something really cool that I learned about when I was going through MEC certification. So I learned about this, where people are using the glossary to create a bit of an interactive syllabus. There may be a session this week on interactive syllabus, but essentially you can create tables in the glossary. It's not as easy as one might think. And so, but you can make it so like maybe there's some videos and when you click something, it takes you over to somewhere else, and you can ask questions throughout the syllabus and have students answer them and things like that. If anyone's using an interactive syllabus, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Libby, yes, I actually just, if you have Sharing Cart, which is a plugin, you can pop your syllabus into Sharing Cart and then you can go to any course you want and drop it into that course. Is anybody here using an interactive syllabus? No? All right. Well, I will try to find an example of an interactive syllabus and put that in as well if I can. It's a pretty cool thing. It takes a little bit more work on the front end, although in the book, you can add H5P modules to the book. You can add video and audio recording to the book. So you can do a lot of different things. Can it be exported to a Word document for accreditors? We did. We exported it or copied and pasted it. We actually gave our accreditors access to courses as guests when they needed it so they could see a syllabus. And then we actually just used sharing cart. We put all the course syllabi in a section in a course that was course syllabus, and they all got access to this course on our Moodle when we did accreditation. And they actually used that as their virtual document room. But yes, you can do lots of stuff. Yeah, Hart, the infographic syllabus is super awesome, and I would love for her to share that. So the infographic syllabus I love, which is basically just, it's literally an infographic of the important things for your syllabus. So Hart is going to share that with us at some point here. So course resources, this is another one. We often are using lots of different external resources. Maybe you have an external testing platform, or you're using a Pearson or a McGraw-Hill or some other type of thing. And you need to have information for students about where to find this. Like, what if you need tech help? Please don't call me. I'm not the tech person. That's what we often feel like, right? Please don't ask me about a problem with a third-party vendor product. I can't fix it, but here's the information. So I always create a course resources section. And in that course resources section, I break it down into different things: academic resources, technical resources, and then if I have something else like lab or clinical or something like that, I will put those there. Academic resources are things like their rubrics. It's just a folder that contains rubrics, so they have quick access. Any important documents related to the course that they might need. So if they need to do an observation somewhere, I would have information about the addresses for those things. Anything like that they might need to have academically. If they need technical resources, I have a section there. I put it on a page. You can use a book if you have multiple technical things, like here's the IT help desk number. Here's the number to call for ExamSoft if you're having exam issues. Here's the number to call for Pearson if you're having problems with your MyLab. Here's who to contact if you have a problem with email. Here's who to contact or how to access the student information system if you need to update your address or phone number. And I just put it all in one place. I am going to click Hart's infographic here so that you guys can actually see what her, I might have to stop sharing for a second to make it work. Okay, let me bring it over. I want you guys to see Hart's infographic. Oh gosh. And I'm going to reshare so you can see what her infographic syllabus looks like. All right. Are you all able to see the infographic? All right, awesome. So this is what Hart was talking about when she was talking about an infographic syllabus. It is literally an infograph where she's got her course name up at the top. It's got a very, very concise description of what this course is about. Objectives, boom, right there with little icons that kind of bring it home for the student. Talks about software that they're going to need to use, forms they're going to need to use, how the course is assessed, so what their breakdown is going to be for their grades. And then the course topics. And she's got the dates right in there, starting on September 1st, starting on October 2nd, or starting on September 30th, that's course topic 1, course topic 2 starts on October 7th, all the way down through for the course, and made a great use of space by zigzagging that. And so that is a way to do an infographic syllabus. This is just a great infographic that gives you the overview of your course. You may still have to,
Oh, I have it. There is a complete syllabus behind it.
Yep, I was just gonna say that. You would still have to have a complete syllabus, which she also has with it, which is what you need. But honestly, they just wanna know, like, what do I need to know? Where do I need to be? And how are you grading me? Grade is always the #1 thing, right? Just tell me what you're gonna do for my grade. And that hits everything they need to know right here, but it's also super easy for them to come back to and find it. when we think about the brains of our current learners and how they learn things and how they retain information, and we often talk about them learning things in microbursts, small bits of information, things that come to them very quickly, this fits that perfectly because it's there, it's a graphic, it's not only just a graphic, it's got the text to go with it. They could go back to the main syllabus and see more. So this is a super effective way of communicating your course like needs and your expectations. It's also a really effective way of meeting your learners and creating presence because you're meeting them where they are. This is something that appeals to them, makes sense to them. It's not just a book droning on. And so that makes them feel like there's really somebody behind this, like putting thought into this and designing this and putting it out there for me. And I really do think it makes a big difference to have something like a syllabus like that. It is so awesome. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for sharing, Hart.
I have to tell you, I took an infographics class from the Online Learning Consortium a few years ago, and it's like to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. See, it looks like, oh, we need an infographic for that. Oh, we need an infographic for this. It's really fun.
Yeah, I really like infographics a lot. And Catherine, yes, as long as it's okay with Hart, we'll put a link right in the course to her example. And yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Hart. So this kind of comes back to course resources, right? Again, just tell me what I need to know. Like if something is broke, I just need to know where to do it. I do really short video walkthroughs of things, especially third-party software, because they will always be like, I don't remember how to get to my integrated test on this platform because they only do it once a semester. And it's usually at the end and the world is collapsing around them and they're trying to get to the end of the semester and they don't remember. So I have very brief 1 minute login to where they need to be, login to where they need to be. And so I use ScreenFlow, but I have an ancient version of that. Screencastify is great. There are lots of resources out there for creating really short screencasts. I think they're super helpful to people to be able to just see and follow along. See it and follow along. And now I've done it and now it's part of my memory and I'll remember how to get there. So these are things I include in my course resources. Giving students access to all of this in a centralized location helps build their self-efficacy because they don't have to keep reaching out to you and they don't have to sift through tons of information to look for this. And so I think it's really important to make sure that things are very concise and organized and compartmentalized in places that make sense for our students. So I'm just going to do a quick time check. We have about 45 minutes left. I don't think we have a ton left to cover. Sometimes I don't remember how much more I have after this point. We will skip breakout session 2 so that we have enough time, but the content for that will be posted in our Moodle course. You can always go in and do the activity if you like. So for your presence, one of the big things is to mix up your delivery of content. Whether you have a synchronous or an asynchronous course, your students need to see you sometimes. Mary, thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful for you to attend. It is so late over there in the UK. I really appreciate it. So when you are delivering your content, you can do things that are just a PowerPoint 1 week or a voiced over PowerPoint. But live or recorded lectures go a long way. And we know that when we're here, we're like, is this going to be posted? Is this going to be posted? Your students feel the same way when you lecture. They're here, they might be listening, they're engaged, but they're asking questions and they're trying to follow along and they're following in the chat. They want to be able to come back to it. So having those recordings makes a huge difference. Voice over PowerPoints help also. Just popping a PowerPoint in, anyone could have put that in. They don't even know that you as their instructor wrote that PowerPoint. Could have been carried over for the last 15 years and you're just someone who churns out grades. So your presence is definitely felt in the way that you deliver that content. And don't ever be afraid to tweak your content as you go so that you can meet their needs. You might be getting feedback that says, hey, thank you for posting these things each week, but they're not really, like we're having a hard time with them. Could you explain it more? Could you hold some office hours? Don't be afraid to change your delivery or tweak some of your lessons in response to things that they're saying to you. Then they're gonna know you're there. They know you're on the other line and you're listening to them. I definitely would offer office hours or small group breakouts. So whether you're using Zoom or Jitsi or Big Blue Button, you can schedule some small sessions and you could say, hey, I'm going to be available for small sessions if anybody wants to join to talk about any questions. And then I usually use a choice activity to ask people what would the best times be, or you could use questionnaire or feedback where they're picking like the top 3 best times for them in a week. You take the highest ones, you make those your group sessions, and you make sure that everyone else knows that they can reach out to you at any time to schedule a meeting if they need to, if they can't be there during those times. Online courses by default mean that you are not working during business hours anymore because most of your students are not in your class during business hours. So you do have to tend to be available a little, but set limits. If you're going to do 3 meetings in a week and one's going to be in the morning and one's in the afternoon and one is in the evening, then you stick to that one in the evening and you don't get sucked into doing them all in the evening. Because you also have a life that you have to balance. And when your life is not balanced, your students will pick up on that, and it definitely affects your ability to be positive in the classroom. So I definitely will offer that. Some other things you can do, you can have a live chat session using the chat activity every other week. So you're just in there doing some chat like we are here in the chat box. But make sure that you have an opportunity to meet with them on a small group. Now, when you're running a totally asynchronous course, like you might be for employee onboarding or recertification, something like that's not as easy to do. But you should always make sure that the people taking the course know that they can somehow reach out to you if they have a question. Because often a lot of that stuff is self-graded, and it's self-graded because you just don't have the manpower to constantly facilitate things that have rolling start dates for people. But you should definitely have 1 or 2 point people that the participants in the class can reach out to. So Boone, there's lots of things there. So if an underage student wants to meet with you alone on Zoom, seems like it could be a problem. So if your district is using Zoom, I'm going to assume that you're K-12 and probably not college. If you're college, we've got other things we can talk about. But if you're K-12, you should have a parental consent that's coming from the district level to the parents, letting them know that they're using Zoom, lots of legal things there, but also so that the parents know that all sessions could have the potential to be recorded. I would ask another teacher to come in and meet with me. I have had this, even working in higher ed, oftentimes you meet alone in your office with students, not a big deal, have a window, but there were some students that you kind of knew were not the students that you should meet alone with. You always needed someone else there because they would say, you said this and you didn't say that. So you definitely need to have a district policy to guide that. And I would really, really push for that, Boone, to make sure that there is something district that covers you. Either you have another teacher in there with you at all times, that session is always recorded, and you really do there's lots of things with Zoom and kids who are under the age of 18 and school districts needing specific consents from parents. That kind of popped up during COVID. So definitely investigate what the policies are there. And if they don't have one, push for it, and always make sure then you bring another teacher onto that Zoom session with you. And that may limit, if you're K-12, that may limit the number of Zoom sessions you can do in a week for one-on-ones, but yeah. Right, as long as you're not making them public. And a lot of that, like on K-12, there's just so much regulation that it's really important to find out what the district policy is. And if they don't have one, they need one. You definitely could ask the parent to be present. If they're under the age, parent can and should be present. And you could say, let me know when your parent's able to meet. I would still record that because, but you would have another adult consenting to the recording. If they can't consent to the recording, then we can't meet, type of thing. And again, comes down to district policy.
I this spring was teaching a course at the college level and giving feedback to students on major projects that they were going to have to revise. Mm-hmm. I actually suggested to them, meeting one-on-one, do you want me to record this and send you the video? Because it was a lot to take in, and they did not sign up for online learning.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
And that's they seemed to benefit from that. And you could tell, but unlisted on YouTube, you could tell that they were watched.
Yeah.
After the fact.
I do. I love those the data points that you can get from YouTube about how many times someone's come back to the video. And that's a great thing too. Do you want me to record this and send you the recording? Very important. I think that we as educators are often working hard to make sure that both our students are protected, but that we are also protected. And I think that is equally as important. And we've all seen many instances where there needs to be protections on both sides. And it can be very difficult, particularly in a K-12 where there aren't regulations yet. They aren't used to using this software, and they're not thinking about these things yet. Whereas we're always like, what if this, what if this, what if this? So great points that you guys are bringing up.
I also recommend that with the K through 12, that you actually set up a time where it's a drop-in time for those specific students, so parents know and students know, and it's more than one person. It really helps preventing those kind of issues arising.
It prevents that, and it also helps to continue some degree of social interaction, which we know is super important for kids in K-12. They're really isolated right now, but it does help with that. A lot of times they may not participate in the larger group things, but if you can set aside some smaller times and you schedule them ahead of time, super helpful for the kids, really helpful for the parents. As a parent whose children were doing that, knowing that schedule ahead of time meant that I was able to work with that, which was great. So one of the other things when you're trying to deliver your content and ensure that you're being present is to make your lessons a little more exciting. Now, I'm not talking about flashy things and bells and whistles and inaccessible flash content, but no one wants to read a PowerPoint or a page for hours on end. So if you've decided, I'm gonna put the whole week's content in one page and it is like just the scroll of death, they're not reading that. Maybe you wanna break it up a little. Maybe you're gonna use lesson, you're gonna pop a little video in, you're gonna do a little audio, throw some images in, maybe you throw something from H5P, and I don't know how familiar people are with H5P, but definitely attend sessions on it this week if you're not familiar. You can use quizzes, you can use feedback to break things up as you go through. Because what happens is, and we're guilty too, right? Have you ever like clicked on a recipe and you're like, good, just tell me how to cook the recipe. Like, I don't want your life story for 6 pages. I'm not reading any of it. The students feel the same way, like just get to what I need to know. So always think about that. I always keep my recipes in the back of my mind when I'm typing and I start to get like long in the chat. I'm just typing, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're writing a recipe for a blog here and that's not what you should be doing. So that's my go-to, that's my reminder. Don't be that person who does the whole history of, where avocados came from. Just kind of get to the point, but break it up, lots of different things. And usually when you're teaching something, kind of like with this PowerPoint, you'll notice there were themes. So the slides look similar for one theme of information. Those would be times that I would break that up. Maybe I'm gonna put self-efficacy in a lesson. Maybe I'm gonna put the getting started in a video, right? So these are examples of how I would break my content up also. And so I always make sure that, learners feel like there's someone behind the content, the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, right? They have to know there's someone there, and it's not just a course that's been thrown up online. So it is that checking out, it is scheduling some of those drop-in meetings and giving them feedback that doesn't sound canned. If everybody gets the same feedback, great job, you met the objectives, that doesn't mean anything to them.
I noticed last night that one of the vendor resources is an H5P module, and just about every single slide is nothing but text.
Yeah.
And I think my eyes rolled back in my head. I was just like,
I'm done.
The amazing things you can do with H5P for all of its faults, you can do some really cool stuff. That is not it. I'm just like,
even Page in Moodle, while it lends itself well to text, there's so much you could be doing on Page to break things up.
When you can just break the text up into 3 pages,
Yeah, you don't need one
paragraph per page. It makes a lot of slides, but it doesn't murder people.
Right.
Another thing that I have found works really well in my PowerPoints is to take them to, and I'll put the link right in my slides, and it'll take them to something tangentially related. So when we do, in my online class, we get ready to do witchcraft in early modern Europe, they click and they go to Monty Python, She's a Witch, right? This is absolutely fantastic. They know, this is like the only pop culture reference in the world that we share is Monty Python, right?
Yeah, knows no age bounds at all. There's no
doesn't, and
generational
they have
gap there.
students that can see it in class after class after class. Even in classes where it's not appropriate, they ask, can we see it? No, I'm serious. So, or I'll send them to an article in Smithsonian about the lapis lazuli trade in Afghanistan. You know, I mean, it'll just take them to all of these things that are related, but not totally related. And the students just love this, and they feel like their minds are growing, and they start to see those connections that history, you know, other reasons why it matters, then you have to fulfill this requirement. And so I found that is really, really, really helpful. Does she weigh more than a dog? Thank you all. This is fantastic. You know, when we did marriage, I did the little clip from Princess Bride, marriage. It just, I find that these things that are not totally just the material the students really get.
I agree. I'm a big, I like to put a meme in there every once in a while. And I definitely will pull from some pop culture things. And you know, have to always be careful, not to date yourself. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But there are things that they all know what you're talking about. But I also really like when you pull something in from the Smithsonian, it's related. It shows them how to make a connection to something that might seem a little abstract on its own. And it takes them out of the context of where they live to start looking at things a little more globally. And it also, you know, we've talked several times about acknowledging different cultures and making sure that people feel validated and represented. When you do that, you make people who have typically not been represented in the educational materials we put out there feel like they are represented. And that is a great way to make a connection and to teach others how to make those. This chat is too funny, so funny. I will talk a bit more about workshop. Yes, so some Moodle activity examples of ways that you can promote presence in your class. Assignment. So typically people are like, hey, write a paper, submit it here. But maybe you used to do something in a face-to-face class where people gave an oral presentation. They can still do that. They can record themselves and they can submit it in there. It doesn't have to be long if you want them to use the built-in RTC recorder. If they are someone who's able to make a video and post the unlisted link on YouTube or Vimeo, they could send you that link. You can leave them video and audio feedback, which I super recommend. Forum, we've talked a lot about forum. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Lesson, Melanie, this is so funny because when I did these slides, I was like, where is lesson? And then I was like, oh wait, lesson's in this presentation. I forgot it in my assessment presentation earlier today. I was like, I know I wrote about lesson. So lesson is pretty cool. I do prefer using H5P over Moodle Lesson, but that's just a personal preference. Lesson is right in Moodle, and you can have pages and they can branch and you can ask questions throughout. You can embed video, you can embed all kinds of things. The H5P branching activity is a little bit different, but similar. So lesson is designed to be like a replacement kind of for PowerPoint that's built in, but has a little more functionality. You can do a little more branching and you can put questions in and it can be graded. So you can actually see how many of those questions students are getting right that you put in, and you can leave them some different feedback and things like that. Lesson's nice because you can build in some pretty nice feedback that feels very, feels really individualized to the student when they're going through that lesson. And it just sort of breaks things up a little. For H5,
sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
When you said that you prefer H5P over the lesson, which H5P activities, like the course presentation or?
Yeah, so it's H5P is my next one here. So I love course presentation in H5P, but I really love branching scenario as well, depending on what it is I'm offering. I like course presentation just because it's not a PowerPoint. So if a student does not have Microsoft Office, they can still access the H5P and it looks every bit as beautiful as a PowerPoint would. You can put lots of elements in there. And I think that that's really effective. The other thing, Dave, there's been some changes to H5P, but we build it using the plugin in Moodle, so we don't have to worry about paying for it. If you build it on their site, it's only free for 30 days, but I build using the plugin. So there are definitely drawbacks to H5P. Melanie talked about not reporting well and not tracking completion. Totally true. I'm not as much of, so here's my whole thing with completion is I'm not as, I build other things in. So for for instance, with H5P, I might use an interactive video. And so we all know, like I said, they click the video and they're like, all right, done, like clicked it, completion set. Interactive video, I can put stop out questions at different points throughout the video that they have to answer, and they have to have a grade registered for it to be able to be considered complete. Like if I'm really like, I really want, but at least I know, did they go through it or whatever. I can see that. There is no foolproof way, honestly, but in your face-to-face classroom, you don't know that they're actually paying attention to literally anything that you say. I can, and I'm a master of this, I can literally stare you dead in the face while you talk and not have heard a single word that you have said. Like some call it a gift. I think it might not be, but that happens in the classroom. But just because they're sitting in there doesn't mean they're any more engaged in your material than if they clicked on the video and walked away. And I think that that's an important thing for us to remember. You can't force them to be engaged. The best you can do is show up, be present, be positive, and give them quality information. You can't force them to do anything with it, but you can try to, you can try your best to put your best work out there. And that's all you can do.
Just to back up before you go past the H5P,
yeah.
Rashida, is that how you say it? I'm sorry. Yeah. I had asked what H5P is.
Yes, so H5P is, it's interactive. It's all interactive stuff. It's based off of HTML5. I am not a programmer, so that's as much as I can explain about that side of it. But it is an open source software program where you can go and you can build all these different things. So maybe you're going to build an interactive video. You're going to embed a video and you want to have stop out points where you put your questions in, or you've taken a 360-degree picture of a room and you want to put it up there and your students to identify the hazards. You want to build accordion style things, flashcards, all this stuff. You can go to, is it h5p.org? Yes, h5p.org and check it out. We are continuing to use I am continuing to use the plugin wherever I'm using H5P. H5P has been integrated into the Atto toolbar in the Atto editor toolbar in Moodle as of 3.8. The functionality was not great, in my opinion, in the sense that it would have, the learning curve was too steep at the time that I upgraded to move the faculty over to that. It's even further upgraded in 3.9, and you will see continued improvements with that. My biggest cautionary statement about H5P is not to use it for true evaluation. And that is because it's completely open source, source code for the page that you create your H5P is stored on is available to the students. So they can technically, I don't know if it's inspect or whatever, but however they bring it up, they can actually see the answers to all of your questions. So Linda, depending on if you're using it through the plugin, you're not paying anything. If you're using it within the Moodle site, you're not paying. If you're building out on their site or in the integration, I'm not sure. Definitely on the site, you get 30 days free and then you have to pay for it. I don't know the exact cost, and that's to be able to store stuff on their server. We are building using the plugin, and then we can actually share those things that we build from course to course pretty easily. I have not looked a lot into the cost. I know that there has been a significant change in all of that recently. Lance just posted some documentation from H5P that gives you information on pricing, and I will put that in the forum or wherever I put the collection of information when we're all done. That's my H5P thing. I just think it has a lot of functionality and it gives you a lot of ability to design a very interesting, what would have been a lecture. You can really put your content out there in a pretty cool way. Another way to kind of spice up your activities is to add individual questions, is using the quiz activity. So I did a session this morning on quiz. Basically, like we look at quiz and we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna give this multiple choice quiz. But Moodle actually has probably 15 or more individual quiz questions types. And so you can do a lot with quiz. You can make all kinds of interactive stuff, but feedback is the key when you're making it interesting and engaging. And you're feeling present is to really bump up that feedback, decide if they're going to get feedback during the test, if they're going to get it after, and then have some overall feedback. You should have question level feedback and overall feedback. Workshop is a really powerful tool, but it can be complicated to set up. And I think that anyone who has used Workshop can probably attest to that. Workshop allows students to submit a draft of their work during the submission cycle. And then you can automatically allocate that work out to other students if you choose to use it that way. And those students will provide feedback on that work. It will be up to the first student to then revise the work and submit it again in the second submission cycle. And this is a way for students to be able to really show you what they know, not just in the work that they produce, because sometimes we have students produce work for us and it's not great, but when you give them the opportunity to critique and provide feedback on someone else's work, that's where you really see them shine. And so this is a way to make things interesting, and also a way to recognize that not every assessment we give elicits what a student is truly capable of or knows. Sometimes it's in the art of being able to provide feedback to someone because they're not emotionally tied to what's been produced. So they're really objective in the feedback they give, and they tend to really drill down to the exact things that we've taught them that they know and give that feedback that way. So it's a really nice way to elicit information. And then you have some final say in there about feedback that goes back at the end. I have used Workshop once for when we were doing accreditation. The type of accreditation that we did at the nursing school involves a self-study where you're writing all about the school. There's 6 standards. Each standard had their own workshop. Each person had their own section of the standard that they had to do. And so they were submitting through Workshop, revising each other's work, giving critiques and feedback, and then we were able to put together a whole self-study by doing this module, which was really, really cool. Lance said they've used Workshop to critique students' video, not just their paper essay, and rubrics help the students to assess each other. 100% agree, Lance. Rubrics are key, providing a really detailed explanation to guide them of what they could do is super effective. Rashida, polls that could take place during a live class, like in Google and Moodle. So yes, well, you can do polls in Big Blue Button, which is the video conferencing there. You could do polls here in Zoom. You can use WooClap. You can use Kahoot, which are other outside things. I tend to use the choice activity. I build it into Moodle. I unhide it when I want them to answer it, and then I can display the results, and then I hide it when we're ready to go on to the next one. So those are some things that I use. WooClap is awesome, and we're getting a free trial of it here through this conference where you're getting to try it. But if you really don't have the budget for anything, I definitely use the choice activity for a quick in-class poll. I know that questionnaire is equally as good. It's just another sort of choice, but it gives you a little more options and functionality than choice. Makes for a really great in-class polling option too.
I'd like to add to Workshop, you can also include in the grade that not only do they get a grade based on what everybody has given them scores on, the grade can also be based on their feedback and how consistent if you have more than one person reviewing, how consistent their feedback was with the rest of the feedback received. So it's not just they get a grade on their project, they also get a grade on their participation in giving feedback.
Awesome. And which is, I just think that's such a really cool functionality of the Workshop, to be able to have that. You have to actually give good feedback, and it has to be consistent, otherwise you're not getting much. And that does help to eliminate some of those outlier things that you sometimes see kind of come in. Especially if they happen to get assigned their friend's work and they don't really want to critique it and give the feedback. So some helpful plugins, Motivated, gamification and incentives. It's what we're using for the Moot coin. And sometimes the question is, well, how do I incentivize anything for online classes? There are lots of different ways to do that. You can incentivize things so that maybe they're getting a couple points, they've earned through doing these games, through earning these points and these coins, they've earned some extra credit on something. They've earned a 24-hour grace period on an assignment. Yes, Moot Coins does work for students. So Motivated has both a corporate and an education version to their platform. Definitely stop by their booth. I think I assume it's Jeff that's going to be at the booth. Jeff is really friendly. He will give you lots of ideas. He'll tell you about different things that they have had clients built in for the incentivization, things that students could buy from the store. We see people use it in face-to-face classes too. And then students might get preferential treatment, or they get to be line leader, not preferential treatment, preferential parking. They might get to be line leader. They might get to have some other thing, a snack, whatever the case may be. Little things motivate people that we might not otherwise think would motivate them. Just looking at this conference, one of the things that was posted is you can have, for 800 moot coins or whatever, you can have a custom meme made of you standing at a restaurant in Helena called Hokkaido, which is usually when they do their Tuesday night thing before the conference. We all go and we get ramen there. So that was like the talk of the town on Twitter for like 24 hours. Like, little things really do motivate people, and it really does make them feel like someone recognized kind of what's going on with them. WooClap, which we are using, I did try to use WooClap to make some word clouds, and that was not successful for me. So I will say there are lots of really cool things in WooClap. I did find that word cloud interface to be a little problematic. Looked like I had to put the right answers in, and then people had to vote on them, but that may have just been, I wanted people to vote on answers that were already there, inputted by other people, but apparently it doesn't work that way. So noted, that was a little confusing for me. But really cool stuff there where you can do some polling, you can make word clouds, choice activities, comparisons, all kinds of neat things. WooClap is a paid service, but the cost seems to be relatively inexpensive, and you can get more information about them. They're here as well. Big Blue Button is a plugin. There is a free version and there's a paid version of Big Blue Button. The free version, you cannot store your recordings for very long. That's just what you need to know about that. With the paid version, you can record your lectures and then save them indefinitely, so you could post them so that the students could keep coming back to them in your course. You could pre-record a lecture as well and post that. And so it's pretty useful if you're looking for something that's not Zoom. Big Blue Button is pretty cool. I'm just gonna move my seat because the sun is now setting. So, and I'm sure people would probably have some experience with Big Blue Button. Yeah, some WooClap, about $7 to $15 a month. And I think that's for like 1,000 students or something for the $7 version of that. But they are here so they can give you some examples on pricing. And there is some stuff where with your moot coin, you can buy a 6-month subscription for very few moot coins, like 20 moot coins or something, to WooClap. If you want to try it out at your school or class or university, you'll get 6 months. Obviously, probably better for higher ed right now, although I don't know when K-12 is starting. New York starts pretty late. Other places start earlier, so you wouldn't be wasting all of your months over the summer. Okay. All right. So, I've talked a lot about feedback, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide, but your feedback should directly address how a student performed in relation to what the standard was or the goal for the activity. So you want to, no problem, Melanie, thanks for being here today. You really want to make sure that your feedback says, this was the standard, this is how you performed to it, as opposed to just like, I think you did a great job, you met all the requirements. Make it very, very specific. Be timely. Don't make your students wait 3-4 weeks to get your feedback, and they've already had 2 assignments like this, because it's meaningless now, and now they've made the same mistake multiple times. Be meaningful. Mean what you're saying. Whatever you say to them, make it sound like it's really genuine. And then provide information about their performance and information that might help them improve their performance in the future. Sometimes you have someone turn in a super stellar assignment and you can't really think of any feedback, and that can be a tough time. But you want to always, no matter what they turn in, for the most part, be able to say, these were the things that were really well. Here's some feed forward, meaning I want you to take this and apply it next time. It's not just feedback. You want to make sure that they know what the expectation is. You're going to take this and you're going to bring it forward, not just look at it in the context of what you've done in the past. I think that feedback and feed forward are really two of the most important aspects of creating that relationship with your student, where they really, really do feel like you are there with them and you are present and you are invested in them. Okay, assignment feedback. We talked a lot about this. You can do video, audio, written. You can do a file upload too. So if it was a written assignment, you can actually mark it up and then upload that marked up file, which I sometimes will do. And even a perfect assignment needs feedback. Tell them what they did well, give them specific examples. So here's the thing. Sometimes your students knock it out of the park and you tell them they did a great job, but they don't know. Just tell me exactly what I did. What was it that you really loved about my assignment? That's every bit as important as telling them what they need to improve. So again, it's feed forward. Make sure, I really, really love the way that you brought in more than just the minimum required one resource. You went out and found multiple resources. I would love to see you continue to do that. And I'd like to be able to share some of those resources with the class. If you're okay with that, give them something that tells them what they did that really wowed you, because it's super meaningful for them to know what they did well. Forum feedback, similar. Choose your topics wisely. Do not make these busy work to supplement conversation, because they are going to get fatigued and then they will not be using them well. Set your criteria and stick to it. If your criteria is you must post your first thing by Wednesday, and this is the other thing, and if you have a word count, whatever your criteria is, make it clear, make it meaningful, and stick to it. Lead by example. When you put a forum up, you should make the first forum post for the week, even if it doesn't answer the question. You might say, this week's forum post has questions and discussion that's going to relate to, tell them the chapter in the book. You might point them in the direction of maybe some websites they might find resources. Let them know you're going to be checking in throughout the week and they should look for your responses, because you may have additional questions for them. I always make my forum, like the forum goes in and then I always post the first forum response for the week. Because if I'm not there, why would they be there? They're not going to come do things if I don't show them that I'm actually in there looking around. You can use rubric grading in forums as of Moodle 3.8. So if you're on 3.8 or higher, you can now use rubrics to grade forums, and I think those are super helpful as well. Same discussion as before about rubrics, though. You just have to make sure that they're well written and they're breaking things down well. So here's just two feedback examples, okay? Sasha, nice post, you met the objectives. Like, how many times do we see that, right? Like, copy and paste, copy and paste. But Sasha, you not only met the objectives, you exceeded them. Your examples provide clear and appropriate support for your claim. And I normally would maybe elaborate on what their claim was. I agree with you, taking the time to provide targeted feedback can greatly improve classroom engagement for both instructor and student. Keep up the good work. First time you ever have to do this, first 1 or 2 times, it is super labor intensive. After that, you can start to have some canned responses that you pop in some and then you personalize them. Right, so Jessica, that's a good point. Jessica said that sometimes when she puts in forums, she thinks the students just want to be like, I agree with you. That's where your rubric comes in. I agree with you will not be accepted as a forum response. End of story. You must provide 2 examples, 2 references to exactly what I wrote, why you agree or disagree with them. And if you disagree with them, you must provide a reference or supporting evidence as to why. I'm very specific. If you state, I agree with you and nice post, you get a 0. End of story. And I don't negotiate that at all. You need to provide more than that, and I make that super clear. But it's also why I don't post, like, I'm not one who puts the discussion forum in every week, because it can be labor intensive if you're doing it well. So keep that in mind, because Jessica, that is a huge issue. I agree, that sounds great. And then I have other feedback, yes.
The other thing, Jessica, and this speaks to that, I am very, very careful about not always posting in the forum. They know I read them, etc. But I'm very careful, because what I have found with students, and maybe this is not as true of K-12, but certainly at the university, if I really want to get their genuine response, sometimes I have to step back, which is not in my nature at all. I kind of want to be right there with them all the time. Yeah. And my experience is that sometimes it's a really good idea to have a week where you just step out and just wait to see what they do. And I did that just this last week, and it was so rewarding for all of us. So that's just something else to keep in mind as well. Know when to step out.
Yes, and that is a good point. As much as we want to be putting in there all the time, we can't, and it doesn't help them if we do. We have to step back and let them do things. When I post in the forum, I don't answer the question at all. I just say, hey, you can expect some responses from me on this day, and that's it. If you're not going to totally step back once in a while, keeps them on their toes. They know you're there because you've been there throughout in different capacities. So you actually, that makes such a great point, Jeanette. Thank you so much for bringing this up. You don't have to be everywhere all the time, and you shouldn't be. You're not everywhere all the time when they're in class and they go home and they do their work. You don't have to be everywhere all the time in Moodle either.
I just find it's just been for forums. I was thinking about maybe doing 2 different forums, one that's like a little bit more formal and one that's less formal, because I teach political science, and so it's just at the university level, like all they've been hearing is what their parents want. So they want to emulate their parents. And I don't want it to be the same academically as well. Well, my professor thinks that. So if they're leaning more towards this way, then this is where I should do it. So like, instead of doing it basically in the forum, I've just been giving pretty elaborate like feedbacks after it's done. So they know I see it, but I wasn't really sure how to go about this or basically what to do, because there's so many different options. So thank you.
Yes. And it can be tough to know what to do and when to do it. So go here. We are going to skip this breakout activity, but you would have broken into small groups and done activity 2 in our course, which is going to be there. You can see what that would have been, but we're clearly like way over on time. I always put 2 breakouts in, but if we have great conversation in the workshop, like we have been here, so much more meaningful than doing a breakout session. We've learned more here as a group than I think we could have gleaned from another breakout session, which I love. Those are my favorite kind of sessions to be involved in. So we'll skip over that one. So individual outreach, we've kind of talked about this, and never underestimate that impact. You know, we're talking about when our students, like, why is the student emailing me every week to ask me the same question? It's not because they have that question. They need that connection. And whether they're online out of choice or because of a forced situation, often that class may be their time to branch out, reach out, and be with people who are, you know, at the same level of achievement that they are, doing the same things, having the same goals, and having at least one experience in common. And that may not happen for all of our students every day. You know, I kind of equate it to when you are like a first-time parent, or you suddenly become a caretaker for someone that is ill, a friend or a family member, and you start to become very isolated. And sometimes the way that you connect is maybe social media or whatever. For some of our students, that connection with us, that's it. They need that. So try to set aside a little bit of time each week to connect with them. Maybe send them that little individualized video for the week, or send them a little email. Hey, just checking in. It really does mean a lot to them. For whatever reason, the students at the school where I was working prior to starting with eThink, they loved Moodle Messenger. They didn't necessarily check or respond to their email, but if you sent them a Moodle message, they were on it. They had the app on their phone. They loved it. And it was literally like, hey, haven't heard from you in a couple weeks. Just wanted to see how you're doing. Is there anything I can do? Any new exciting things going on in your classes or whatever? Very short and sweet, but it meant a lot to them. And I'll tell you kind of like a little funny story. You can do group messaging in Moodle. And so maybe I have like one course where I have all of the students, the whole school are enrolled, but I only needed to send a message to students who are in this particular lab group, and I have them broken up in groups in the course level. And I would send this message, and I would make it generic. It wasn't necessarily addressed directly to them, but it was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, we just posted the scholarship opportunity. I don't want you to miss out on it. Here's where you can go to get the information. They always would reply to me individually. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you thought of me. It was a generic canned message that went to 50 of them, but they felt like I reached them individually. So never underestimate the power of even using a group message, but hitting their individual Moodle message box. It means the world to them. And it would to me too, to know that somebody like thought about me and reached out to me. I just was so amazed when they were responding to those all the time. And it was very clear that they felt like things were very personal, that we were, not forgetting them, especially in the time of COVID. We made sure to reach out. So like I said, Moodle message, you could do some individual meetings, you could do some group meetings, you could use the scheduler app, which is a plugin that you can use in Moodle that allows you to post your hours where they could schedule a time to meet with you, which is really helpful. You might pop out an email each week and just set up those specific times where you meet with students, and you want to make sure you're very clear. You communicate the times that you'd be available and how they can sign up for those times. And things like the scheduler plugin are really helpful for that. I'm sorry, I'm just flying through these last ones. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. You've dedicated 3 hours to me. So the impact of your positive presence. We know our students will be more engaged if they feel positivity in that classroom. When they feel the facilitators invested in their learning and achievement, they are going to do more, and your presence really changes that. And when you have a positive presence, the students form meaningful relationships with content, the concepts, you, and other students, because your positive presence can help to change the atmosphere in that classroom, right? And we all know that everybody at some point had a teacher that sticks out in their mind who was very negative, and the classroom as a whole might have been their worst year. The kids were negative, things were just not very positive. And so when you bring that positive presence in your engagement in that classroom, you can sometimes change the tide of the dynamic in the classroom. And Jeanette talked about it. She brings in just little things that she knows are going to kind of pep them up. It's a way to connect. It's funny for them. That gives them all a common point to rally around, and they feel connected in that piece. And so those things are super important, and I think they're really effective.
Because we were synchronous in the spring,
mm-hmm.
for one of my classes, and this both worked and was kind of an interesting reaction. I was able to actually, for one of my classes, bring in a friend of mine who lives a long way away to speak to the students, and that kind of really woke them up, and it fit in. But then my other students were like, well, we heard that the last class met your friend, and well, are we going to get to meet him? And I was like, no, because it's not appropriate to this class.
Right, like it's not even the same content.
And you think that they're all off campus, or they're all on their computers and they don't know stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you.
Oh, they know.
They know. They just, I mean, I don't know why I've been at this for, almost 14 years, and I am still surprised when they know stuff that how could you possibly know that? And so I'm just saying, in this case, a guest was just what they needed as kind of a pickup.
Yeah.
But when I didn't have the same guest for the other groups, even though it wasn't even related, they were just thought, okay.
Yeah, what you do for one, you have to do for the others.
You have to do for the others, or they said, or find us something else that's cool.
Yes. So we are wrapping up our presentation, and we are ending with the same quote we started with, which is that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship, as you can see. And now my dog Pearl is just losing her mind. Here I have a couple references. I will post this PowerPoint so that you have all of this. And then here, if you want to stop by and say hi to me or my eThink team, you can find me in the eThink virtual vendor booth. I'll be there Thursday from 2 to 3:30. And if you stop by, you get 100 Moot coins. That is what we are awarding. So stop by and say hi to me. So this will all get posted. The video will also get posted. And I will grab the chat here, and I will make sure to post the chat, just the resources that we've shared with one another. Alrighty. Okay, so Sasha, you can stop recording, and we will start to say goodbye. I hope to see some of you at the social events tonight as well. Remo has been a pretty cool tool where you can navigate through looks like a virtual cafe and sit down at a table and move around and chat with people, which is a really cool tool for facilitating some small group discussion.